It's a quiet night as I begin this story. Outside, the rain taps gently against the window, a rhythm as old as the world itself. I sit with a cup of warm tea, the air thick with the scent of rain and memory, and I think about beginnings, not of a year or a life, but of a world. Before oceans, before mountains, before life had even imagined itself, there was fire. When I close my eyes, I can almost see it. A young sun, fierce and white, burning with the violence of creation. Around it, a storm of dust and stone fragments of older stars, the remains of dead worlds drifting through the newborn solar system. They move, collide, fuse, and shatter again. Gravity pulls them together, relentless, patient, merciless. Out of chaos, something begins to take shape. That something was Earth. At first, it was not the blue planet we know. It was molten, a sphere of liquid fire glowing red beneath a veil of gas and ash. The sky was not blue, but black, streaked with meteors, flashes of light born from collisions that never seemed to end. Asteroids the size of mountains crashed into its surface, each impact shaking the planet to its core. I can feel that heat in my imagination, the weight of creation, the sound of stone melting. The air itself was poison thick with carbon dioxide, ammonia, and steam. There was no life, no water, no land, only a storm that never stopped. In that inferno, the planet was being forged. The heaviest elements sank inward, forming a dense metallic core. Around it, the mantle churned molten rock, rising, cooling, sinking again in endless motion. And above all of it, the crust began to form thin, fragile, temporary. I sometimes imagine standing there, though no human could. The ground would shift beneath my feet like liquid glass. The horizon would glow with red light, and the air would burn with metal vapor. There was no silence, only thunder, the thunder of birth. And then something extraordinary happened. Out of the darkness came another impact. Not small this time, not like the others. A collision so massive it would change everything. A planet-sized body roughly the size of Mars struck the young Earth at an angle. The explosion was beyond imagination, a wave of molten rock flung into space, a storm of debris circling the planet. For months, the sky glowed white-hot. The Earth's surface melted again, oceans of lava stretching across its face. But from that chaos, a new world began to form, a companion born of the same fire. The fragments circling Earth gathered, coalesced, and cooled, and slowly, in the silence of space, the moon was born. I picture that moment, Earth and moon side by side, both glowing red, both scarred and magnificent. Tidal forces between them stabilized Earth's tilt, slowed its rotation, and set the rhythm that would one day guide the oceans. Even before there was life, the moon was already shaping destiny. Time passed. Millions of years turned like pages in a book. The impacts grew fewer, the heat began to fade, and the first crust thickened. Volcanoes still roared, spewing lava and gas, but the violence was becoming rhythm. Steam rose into the sky, building clouds. The atmosphere, once toxic, began to fill with water vapor. And then came the first rain. It must have fallen for centuries, maybe millennia. Endless storms cascading from the sky, hissing against the still hot rock. The sound would have been deafening, a planet cooling under the weight of water. Rivers formed, flowing across basalt plains. Steam rose where raindrops met lava. Oceans began to gather in the planet's low places, dark and vast and endless. I imagine that moment of stillness after the storm. The surface cooled, the air thickened, and the first reflections of light danced on liquid water. The Earth, once a world of fire, had found balance. It was no longer chaos, it was potential. The moon hung above, pale and distant, pulling gently at the newborn seas. The sun burned beyond the clouds, softer now, filtered by vapor and haze. The first blue shimmered in the darkness of space, the blue of oceans, the blue of home. This was the Earth's first memory. And as I sit here tonight, listening to the rain against the window, I feel that same rhythm echo through time, the rhythm of creation, of cooling, of patience. The Earth was born from fire shaped by impact, softened by rain, and cradled by silence. It would be billions of years before anything would crawl, breathe, or dream. But even then, even in its infancy, the planet was already alive in its own way. Not with biology, but with motion, with chemistry, with purpose. The foundations of life were already stirring beneath the waves, waiting for the right spark, the right moment. As the night deepens, I close my eyes and think of that first ocean, silent, endless, heavy with possibility. Somewhere in its depths, molecules are drifting, meeting, combining. The fire that once raged across the surface now flickers quietly in chemistry. Creation has not ended. It has only changed form. The Earth, once fire, has become memory. The rain does not end for centuries. I can almost hear it now, not as the gentle rhythm on my window tonight, but as a roar that never stops. A storm so vast it covers the world, where each raindrop hisses against stone still hot from creation. The air is thick with vapor, the ground trembles under the weight of water. And in this endless downpour, the planet is changing. I imagine standing at the edge of that primeval storm, though no human could survive there. The light from the young sun is dimmed by clouds. The sky is black and furious. Lightning rips through the vapor again and again, illuminating a landscape of boiling rivers and newborn lakes. The smell of minerals fills the air, sulfur, iron, carbon, the scent of a world in transition. It is here in this chaos that the first oceans begin to form. As the rain falls, it gathers in the planet's lowest places, filling cracks and basins left by impacts long past. Steam rises as the water touches hot rock, feeding the clouds that circle above. Slowly, the world begins to cool. For the first time, Earth holds oceans not of fire, but of water. The first oceans are nothing like those we know. They are dark, acidic, filled with dissolved metals and minerals leached from the volcanic crust. Their color is not blue, but black-green, their air heavy with methane and carbon dioxide. There is no oxygen here, not yet. And yet, within this strange chemistry, something extraordinary begins to stir. The crust cracks beneath the oceans, and from those cracks, hot water rises rich in minerals and energy. Hydrothermal vents, like underwater volcanoes, release jets of heat and chemical nutrients into the surrounding water. Around them, the impossible begins to seem inevitable. Molecules meet, combine, and react. Simple structures form not life yet, but the foundation of it. I imagine floating above one of those vents, the water shimmering with heat. Black plumes rise like smoke, mixing with the colder ocean above. Minerals crystallize and fall like snow. The water here is rich, not in the way we understand richness, but in the way the universe does with potential. Somewhere, a molecule of carbon bonds with hydrogen, with oxygen, with nitrogen. It forms chains, spirals, rings. Some are fragile, breaking apart within seconds, but others persist, folding into new shapes, repeating their own patterns. And among them, a few learn something astonishing: how to copy themselves. Replication, the beginning of memory. It happens slowly, without intention, without mind. Chemistry becomes persistence, and persistence becomes the first whisper of life. In that dark ocean where the heat of the earth meets the cold of space, something begins that will never truly end. I sit here and think about it, how the same elements that once burned in the heart of stars now swirl in the depths of a newborn sea. How matter, given time, finds ways to organize itself, to endure, to remember. It is not magic, though it feels like it. It is the patience of nature, the quiet work of billions of years. Lightning still dances through the clouds above. Each strike delivers energy raw and untamed into the oceans below. The atmosphere crackles with it, the sky itself becoming a laboratory. Water, ammonia, methane, simple gases break apart and reform under that electric fire. More molecules, more complexity. The world is restless, alive with motion even before life. There is a strange peace in this violence. Every flash, every storm, every surge of heat is part of a long preparation. The earth is not hostile, though it looks that way. It is learning, it is building. I imagine watching the continents rise and sink beneath the rain. The crust is thin, fragile, reshaping itself again and again. Volcanoes puncture the surface, releasing clouds of ash and gas. Each eruption thickens the atmosphere, traps heat, and feeds the storms above. It is a feedback loop, destruction feeding creation. In the oceans, the chemistry grows more complex. Lipids form membranes, small bubbles enclosing reactions inside them. For the first time, the line between living and non-living begins to blur. Molecules no longer just exist, they respond. They change based on what happens around them. They begin to evolve. And that word evolve changes everything. It means that chance can give rise to order, that chaos can produce structure, that failure and persistence together can create something new. Every molecule that fails, every one that breaks apart becomes the soil from which success grows. Billions of these tiny experiments play out at once across the oceans, in vents, in tide pools, in droplets of rain clinging to rock. And among them, some succeed. The first protocells, fragile, microscopic, beautiful, divide and multiply. They consume simple molecules for energy, produce waste, and change the water around them. The first ecosystem, invisible but unstoppable, has begun. I close my eyes and try to feel what that would be like to be one of the first living things in a world that has never known life. There is no fear, no hunger, no thought, only chemistry reacting and continuing. Each division, each replication is a victory against entropy. Life does not yet know what it is, but it knows how to continue. Time expands again. Millions, tens of millions of years pass. The oceans deepen, the crust thickens, the atmosphere stabilizes. The sun's light softens through the haze, and the world's surface begins to calm. Life, small and persistent, spreads. It colonizes the sea floor, the shallows, the hydrothermal vents. Every new generation is slightly different, slightly better. And then the first innovation. Some of these ancient cells discover how to use sunlight. They trap its energy, storing it, turning light into chemistry. The first photosynthesis. It is the greatest leap since life began, a new way to draw energy, a new way to survive. The world changes in response. Oxygen, once rare, begins to appear. At first, it is a poison. Many early forms of life die in its presence. But others adapt, evolve to use it. Oxygen spreads, transforming the sky, rusting the rocks, changing the color of the oceans themselves. The air becomes breathable, not for us yet, but for something. The great oxidation has begun. I think of this as the Earth's first breath. The planet, once choking on its own gases, now exhales. The blue of the oceans deepens. The haze begins to thin, revealing a brighter sun. The world is still simple, but it has memory now, not just chemical, but biological. Each living thing carries within it the record of what came before, and in that, the Earth achieves something remarkable: continuity. The atoms that once floated freely in volcanic gas now exist in the walls of cells, in strands of genetic code. The fire that once burned in magma now burns quietly in metabolism. The planet that once roared with creation now hums with life. I open my eyes, back in the quiet of my room, the rain still falling outside. The sound feels ancient now, connected somehow to that first endless storm. Every drop that hits the earth tonight is part of the same cycle, the same water that once fell on molten rock, that once filled the first oceans, that once gave birth to life itself. It is humbling to realize that nothing is truly new. The water we drink, the air we breathe, the minerals beneath our feet, all have been here since that beginning. They have moved through forms, through bodies, through time. They are the Earth's memory written in cycles. As I sit in this quiet moment, I imagine the world just after the first life began, the oceans dark and rich, the atmosphere shifting, the stars glimmering faintly through the haze. No sound of wind, no call of birds, no voice yet to name it. Only movement, only growth, only the slow, patient rhythm of becoming. This is where everything started, not with words or thoughts, but with chemistry and persistence, with rain and time, with oceans from the sky. And even now, billions of years later, that same persistence lives within me in every breath, every heartbeat, every cell that remembers how to survive. I am the echo of that first storm, the continuation of that first spark. The earth, once fire, has become water, and in that water, it has learned how to live. The rain has stopped. The clouds that once shrouded the young world are thinning, now drifting apart like the remnants of a long dream. I imagine the sunlight, pale but persistent, breaking through for the first time in ages, touching the surface of oceans that have only just learned how to rest. Beneath those still waters, life stirs. It does not yet crawl or breathe. It does not know hunger or fear. It is silent, invisible, but alive. The first cells float in the darkness, fragile bubbles of chemistry encased in membranes. They divide, drift, and die, but some endure. Each one carries within it a secret older than thought, the ability to remember. Replication, the first act of memory in the universe. I imagine watching them from above, though there would be nothing to see with the naked eye, only a faint shimmer in the water, a whisper of movement too small to name. And yet, in that shimmer, everything that would ever live already exists in potential. Plants, animals, humans, all begin here as a pulse of chemical persistence beneath an ancient sea. The ocean is dark green-black, rich with iron and minerals. The air above is thick with methane and ammonia, filtering the sun's light into a deep reddish glow. It is a world without oxygen, without color, without sound. But beneath the waves, reactions hum, a quiet song of carbon and energy. The first cells consume the chemicals around them, feeding on the earth itself. They absorb, transform, and release. Slowly, patterns emerge, metabolism, the circulation of energy, the balancing of order and entropy. For the first time, the universe has found a way to keep itself alive. I often think about that. How improbable it all is. How the same laws that govern the collapse of stars and the drift of galaxies also allow for the rise of cells that can heal, adapt, and replicate. It means that life is not an accident. It is a pattern, an echo of the same physics that shaped the cosmos. The early ocean becomes a vast living experiment. Millions of chemical combinations unfold each second. Some fail and vanish, others succeed and multiply. Evolution begins not yet as creatures, but as ideas, as instructions written in molecules. One day, within those drifting cells, something new appears, strands of code fragile and complex. RNA. Then DNA. Memory crystallizes into information. Life can now pass its successes to the next generation. Mistakes become mutations. Mutations become diversity. Diversity becomes strength. I imagine that first chain of DNA twisting gently in the warmth of the ocean. It holds no consciousness, no thought, but it holds the instructions for survival. Every strand that would ever exist, from the simplest bacteria to the mind that now imagines them, carries the same alphabet, the same code. We are all of us written in that language. The days grow longer. The sun's light brightens through the thinning atmosphere. The ocean's warm currents strengthen, and life begins to spread. Microbial mats form on the sea floor, weaving themselves into thin green carpets. They capture sunlight, store energy, and release something new, oxygen. It begins as a poison. For most of life, it is death. Cells that cannot tolerate it perish, but a few adapt. They learn to use oxygen as fuel, turning its danger into power. The oceans rust as the iron within them reacts, falling to the bottom as red sediment. The sky begins to change color. Slowly, the world turns blue. This is Earth's first transformation. The Great Oxidation Event, a silent revolution that lasts millions of years. I close my eyes and imagine that color emerging, the first true blue of the atmosphere. The haze of methane fades, replaced by clarity. For the first time, sunlight touches the surface of the Earth without distortion. Shadows form. The cycle of day and night begins to matter. The planet has learned to breathe. With oxygen comes energy, more energy than life has ever known. New forms evolve, more complex, more ambitious. Cells begin to cooperate, merging into larger units, sharing work, sharing memory. The first eukaryotes are born cells with internal structures, with nuclei to hold their DNA safe. They are stronger, more stable, more creative. The story of life changes again. I think of these early beings as architects, invisible builders of possibility. They float in the oceans, merging and dividing, forming alliances that last generations. Some absorb smaller cells not as prey, but as partners. A smaller cell provides energy, while the larger one offers protection. Symbiosis. Another word for trust begins. Inside those partnerships, mitochondria are born, the powerhouses of all complex life. Even now, every cell in my body carries them, descendants of those ancient unions. It humbles me to think that every breath I take is powered by the echo of that first act of cooperation. Millions of years pass. Life remains microscopic, unseen, but unstoppable. Every square inch of the ocean becomes alive with bacteria, algae, and protozoa. They photosynthesize, they feed, they die, and in their death, they change the planet further. The seafloor becomes layered with their remains, the first sediments, the first fossils, the first record of time. Then, after billions of years of quiet evolution, the world changes again. The sun brightens. The balance shifts. Ice begins to spread from the poles, creeping across continents. The earth cools slowly, relentlessly. Oceans freeze, the air grows thin, and much of life retreats into the warmth of the sea floor. It is a global winter, the first great snowball Earth. From above, the planet would look like a white jewel hanging in the darkness of space, frozen oceans, silent continents, and an atmosphere dim with ice crystals. The sound of waves vanishes. The pulse of heat slows. For millions of years, the world is silent again. And yet, life does not die. Beneath the ice, near volcanic vents and cracks in the crust, warmth still seeps from below. In those hidden refuges, the descendants of the first cells endure. They slow their metabolism, wait through the ages, and when the world warms again, they emerge, ready, changed, persistent. Life once again has proven itself unbreakable. I pause here in my mind to let that truth sink in, that survival is not about strength, but patience. That endurance, not speed, is the measure of life. The first living things had no eyes, no hearts, no voices, but they had persistence. And that persistence passed through every generation is why anything exists today. The ice melts. Volcanoes awaken again, breathing carbon dioxide back into the air. The atmosphere thickens, trapping heat. The oceans thaw. The blue returns, and this time life is ready. Cells join together, forming colonies that act as one, the first multicellular organisms. They move, respond sense. Some grow filaments, others form spheres. Complexity blossoms not suddenly, but inevitably. The same patience that endured through fire, through rain, through ice, now expresses itself as creativity. The planet is older now, calmer. The continents are beginning to take shape. Rivers carve the land, storms carry minerals to the sea, and the atmosphere glows faintly blue-green. And in those waters, under a dim but steady sun, life expands. It builds, it diversifies, it prepares. For hundreds of millions of years, the world remains simple, microbial, silent, unseen. But within that silence, the stage is being set for everything that will come. If I could stand there on the edge of one of those ancient shores, I might not see much, only still water and a faint green shimmer near the surface. But if I could look closer beyond the limits of sight, I would see the miracle of becoming. Cells dividing genes, mutating tiny organisms, cooperating, competing, inventing. This is the dawn of life, not a moment, but an era. The world is learning how to be alive. When I open my eyes again, I can hear the rain outside my window has started once more, gentle, familiar, ancient. I realize it's the same rain, in a way the same water that once filled those first oceans, that once sheltered the first cells. And I can't help but smile, because even now, billions of years later, we are still part of that same story. The rain that falls tonight, the air I breathe, the pulse in my chest. All of it is a continuation of that beginning. The earth has learned to breathe, and through it, so have I. There are moments in the history of this planet when the silence of ages gives way to a single quiet breath that changes everything. The Great Oxidation was one of them. I imagine the earth as it was then, vast, silent, and strange. The oceans are dark green, thick with life too small to see. The air carries a metallic tang, sharp and raw. Above it all, the light of the sun falls through a haze red and dim. It is a world on the edge of transformation. I find myself standing on an imaginary shore, the kind that existed long before continents found their shapes. The horizon glows with the faint shimmer of methane haze, and beneath it, the water stirs with invisible life. Cyanobacteria, simple, patient, tireless, drift in great mats near the surface, turning sunlight into energy, exhaling oxygen into the world. At first, their gift is deadly. Oxygen, so essential to me, is poison to most of the life that came before. I imagine those ancient oceans filling with silent death as oxygen reacts with iron and sulfur, stripping the seas of their color, rusting the ocean floor into shades of red. Entire microbial worlds vanish, consumed by the very breath of the new. It is a paradox I find deeply beautiful, that life creates its own challenges, that progress always comes with loss. The air begins to change. The haze thins. Sunlight grows clearer, sharper. The blue of the sky begins to form. And with each molecule of oxygen released, the planet itself becomes something new, a world capable of sustaining complexity. This, I think, is when the Earth truly learns to breathe. The atmosphere fills slowly over millions of years. The balance is delicate, shifting between eruption and absorption. Volcanoes still roar, releasing carbon dioxide and methane, and the oceans still pull it down. Every breath of gas, every eruption of lava, every ripple of light is part of a grand chemical dialogue between life and planet. When I close my eyes, I can almost hear it, not as sound, but as rhythm. The exhalation of volcanoes, the inhalation of microbes, the slow heartbeat of weathering rock. Each balances the other. The planet has found its pulse. Beneath the surface, the continents are moving. Slowly, silently, they drift over molten rock, colliding and parting. The crust thickens, stabilizes. Mountains begin to rise, erode, and rise again. The oceans deepen their currents, becoming steady highways of heat and minerals. The Earth is learning the patterns that will one day define its climate, wind, rain, tide, and season. And through all this, life continues to evolve. The first eukaryotes. Those ancient cells with nuclei have grown more complex. They are no longer solitary drifters. They begin to form colonies, networks of cooperation. Each cell within a cluster performs a role gathering energy, moving nutrients, repairing damage. Together they survive what alone they could not. It is in these early alliances that the idea of multicellularity takes root, not through intention, but through necessity. In a changing world, unity becomes strength. I picture a colony of these primitive cells floating near the surface of a shallow sea. The sunlight dances above them. Oxygen bubbles rise around them, and within their tiny membranes, history unfolds. One day, their descendants will become plants, animals, fungi. But for now, they are only potential, fragile, and eternal. The atmosphere thickens with oxygen, and with it, the unseen hand of chemistry begins to draw a new danger. Free oxygen meets methane, once the warming blanket of the planet, and strips it from the air. The greenhouse fades. The warmth slips away. The Earth begins to freeze. I see it, the creeping edge of ice, white and unrelenting. Snow falls at the equator. Oceans crust over with frozen skin. The great oxidation, which gave the world breath, now steals its warmth. The planet enters another deep sleep. Snowball. Earth again and again. To imagine such a world is to imagine beauty and desolation entwined. White light reflecting endlessly across the globe. The atmosphere thin and cold. Volcanoes breaking through sheets of ice, their eruptions the only motion left. The oceans beneath, dark and silent, still harbor life. Cyanobacteria continue their work defiant, hidden in pockets of warmth near the vents. They never stop breathing, never stop creating. Even in the silence of ice, the world is still alive. I often think about this resilience, how life from the very beginning has endured everything the planet could offer. Firewater, ice poison time. It never stops. It simply changes its form, adjusts its rhythm, and waits. And in that waiting, evolution sharpens its tools. Cells learn to store energy more efficiently, to protect themselves from cold, to use oxygen with more precision. DNA grows more complex. Mutations refine function. When the world finally thaws, life bursts forward again, stronger than before. The thaw comes with the return of volcanoes. They pour carbon dioxide into the air, warming the planet, melting the great sheets of ice. Rivers return, carrying nutrients across the land and back into the seas. The oceans bloom with green once more, a rebirth patient and inevitable. In this new warmth, evolution accelerates. Multicellular forms diversify, experimenting with symmetry, structure, movement. Some grow filaments, others shells. Complexity spreads as if the long sleep had been a dream of preparation. The continents drift again, slowly merging into one, a supercontinent forming near the equator. Shallow seas surround it, warm and rich. The chemistry of the oceans changes, becoming more hospitable, more vibrant. The stage is nearly set for something the Earth has never seen before. I sit in silence, imagining this balance: oxygen above nutrients, below sunlight striking the water's surface, and beneath it, the slow miracle of evolution at work. It feels almost intentional, though I know it is not. There is no will guiding it, no consciousness deciding what comes next, only the unfolding of possibility within the boundaries of physics and chemistry. And yet, the result is art. When I think of art, I think of patterns. When I think of patterns, I think of life. The world at this time is a painting of color and motion. The seas shimmer with microbial blooms. Minerals glitter on the sea floor. Clouds swirl in high, thin layers across a blue sky that has finally become stable. The planet is no longer just a place, it is a system, a living symphony of cycles. Volcanoes breathe, plants exhale oceans, circulate ice forms, and melts, life thrives and adapts. The boundaries between living and non-living blur until the whole planet seems alive. Perhaps it is. I look outside my window now at the gentle rain returning, and I see that same cycle reflected in miniature. Water rises, condenses, falls, and returns. Air moves, carrying warmth from one place to another. Every drop, every gust is part of the same story that began billions of years ago. The earth has found its breath not in the lungs of animals yet to come, but in the rhythm of its own systems. The carbon cycle, the water cycle, the oxygen cycle. These are the lungs and heartbeat of a planet that has learned to live, and within that breath, life listens. Cells, colonies, and simple organisms sense the change, respond, evolve. The machinery of DNA refines itself further. Proteins become specialized. Communication begins, chemical signals shared between cells. Cooperation growing more complex. Life is preparing for its next great leap. I imagine those moments silent but monumental, scattered across the oceans. A cell divides into two, and one of its descendants will one day become the ancestor of everything that moves. Another learns to attach to a surface, forming the first structures. Another evolves pigment, capturing sunlight with more precision. None of them know what they are creating. But the world knows. The world feels it. Every change in chemistry, every flicker of adaptation is written into the planet's memory. The rock layers hold it, the air records it, and the ocean preserves it. The earth itself becomes a witness. When I breathe tonight, I realize it is the same air reshaped over eons, recycled through lungs, leaves, and stone. Oxygen, carbon, hydrogen atoms that once drifted through volcanic gas now flowing through my veins. The planet breathes, and so do I. This is not just the story of life. It is the story of continuity, the unbroken chain between what was and what is. And as the earth exhales, readying itself for the explosion of life that waits ahead, I understand something quiet but immense. The world has never been still. It only learns new ways to move. Soon it will move again in color, in light, in the wild dance of creatures that will fill the oceans and change everything. The next breath will be creation. Light deepens across the water. The ocean that once held only drifting cells now stirs with shapes. Faint outlines, shifting patterns, movement. The surface glows softly where the sunlight meets it, and beneath the shadows begin to take form. I see them in my mind's eye, these first creatures of complexity. Small, fragile, translucent, yet alive in ways the world has never known before. For billions of years, life existed only as stillness and repetition. Now it begins to act, to sense, to move. A soft current drifts through the shallow seas, carrying grains of sand across the floor. The bottom is rich with microbial mats, their green and brown filaments swaying gently. Within them, new beings stir, worms, soft-bodied, narrow as threads burrowing through the sediment. Their passage leaves faint trails, the first marks of movement on the surface of Earth. Above them, plankton bloom in the sunlight. Tiny algae shimmer their pigments, catching the rays that filter through the water. They divide in swarms, turning light into life, fueling a chain of existence that stretches through every layer of the sea. For the first time, the ocean has layers of meaning: predators, prey, grazers, and scavengers. The web of life has begun to weave itself, and every thread trembles with energy. The water grows crowded. Organisms evolve armor spines, eyes. New shapes appear, shells made of calcium carbonate, intricate, delicate, protective. The arms race of evolution begins quietly, without malice, but with endless curiosity. Each adaptation leads to another. Each change provokes an answer. I imagine being suspended in that water, surrounded by movement, a ballet of forms, colors, and instincts. Trilobites crawl across the seafloor, their segmented bodies glinting in the dim light. Their legs stir up dust as they search for food. Small worm-like creatures retreat into burrows. Floating above them are jelly-like animals, transparent and slow, pulsing with gentle rhythm. There is beauty in this chaos, and something like awareness. Not thought, not yet, but sensation. Eyes evolve lenses of crystal, primitive but miraculous. For the first time, light becomes perception. The world can now see itself. It's strange to think that seeing began here in the quiet of a Cambrian sea. Before vision, the world was only texture and pressure. Now color enters existence. Shadows have meaning. Direction matters. Life can move toward what it wants, away from what it fears. With sight comes pursuit. With pursuit comes flight. The ocean becomes alive with motion, one creature chasing another, each driven by hunger, each learning new ways to survive. Predation. The oldest story of all begins. I watch it unfold in thought. Small, soft-bodied animals flee into the sand. Larger ones develop shells. Others grow jaws, limbs, spines. The water becomes a testing ground for creativity. Endless experiments in structure and strategy. Some grow long tails for propulsion. Some grow plates of armor. Some flatten themselves to hide on the seafloor. Others rise toward the light, feeding on drifting plankton, learning to swim with rhythm. And then, among them, something entirely new. Creatures with segmented limbs, jointed, flexible, strong. They scuttle, dig, grasp. Their descendants will one day rule the land, but for now, they are kings of the ocean floor. Trilobites, armored and graceful, dominate the world. Their compound eyes made of crystal scan the murky depths. They sense light and shadow, danger and prey. Their world is not silent. It vibrates with motion, pulses, patterns. I imagine watching from above as they move across coral-like fields, weaving between sponges and sea fans, their bodies leaving trails behind them. Each track, each burrow, each ripple is a signature of life written in sediment. Elsewhere, strange forms drift, the ancestors of jellyfish, soft and ghostly, their tentacles trailing light. Some glow faintly in the dark, their bioluminescence flickering like stars scattered through the sea. Others float closer to the bottom, their bodies shaped like leaves, fans, or discs. They have no eyes, no mouths, no bones. They absorb nutrients, directly existing as gentle witnesses to the beginning of complexity. Farther down, where light never reaches, life still thrives. There, creatures feed on falling particles, on the slow rain of organic matter from above. Even in darkness, nothing goes to waste. The Cambrian is a world of invention. Every living thing is an experiment. Evolution works not by plan, but by endless iteration, by the patience of trial and error. Out of randomness comes purpose. Out of failure, progress. I think about that often, how the universe left to itself finds beauty through repetition. How without any thought or design, it creates order, structure, elegance. The same laws that guide the orbits of stars shape the curves of shells and the symmetry of bodies. Somewhere in those shallow seas, the first reefs begin to form. Sponges and corals build skeletons of calcium, creating shelter for others. The seafloor, once bare, now teems with texture. The architecture of life is being drafted one polyp at a time. The diversity is staggering. Creatures grow legs, fins, tentacles, shells. Some swim with fins of flesh, others glide with flaps of skin. The water churns with possibilities, and then, as if in response to the abundance, another leap occurs. Nervous systems simple at first begin to appear. Life can now react faster, sense more clearly. Movements become coordinated, purposeful. The ocean becomes intelligent not in thought, but in instinct. It is the first whisper of what will one day become consciousness. I try to imagine that awakening, what it would feel like to sense, to respond, to be aware of the world for the first time. Not as an idea, but as a pulse. To feel warmth, to perceive motion, to move because of it. That is where experience begins. The Cambrian is the era of that first experience, when life learned not only how to live, but how to notice that it is alive. Above these new seas, the continents remain barren. The land is silent, scorched by ultraviolet light, its surface still raw stone and dust. But the oceans below carry promise, and the patterns being shaped here will one day spill outward. Time stretches in long, steady waves. Millions of years pass. Whole species rise and vanish, replaced by others better suited to their world. The fossils they leave behind become the pages of the planet's autobiography, written in layers of stone. I sometimes think of fossils as memories not of death, but of persistence. A trilobite's shell pressed into rock is a record of motion that once disturbed the sand. A shell fragment is a whisper of hunger. A ripple mark, a memory of tide. The earth remembers everything. The ocean, once a silent cradle of chemistry, is now a stage of endless choreography. Predators glide prey, dart scavengers crawl. The rhythm of life, death, and renewal fills every depth. And though no sound yet carries through the water, no call, no voice, no thought, the world has begun to move with purpose. Every action has consequence. Every creature, no matter how small, changes the system it inhabits. That, I think, is the truest definition of life, to change the world simply by existing. I look out my window and see the reflection of rain on glass. The patterns ripple outward, merging and fading like the ripples of that ancient sea. It is the same motion, the same geometry, only smaller, gentler, more familiar. Everything that exists now once existed there, in simpler form: hunger, motion, perception, persistence. When I breathe the air their ancestors made. When I move, I follow the same logic of motion first written in their limbs. When I think, I echo the same pattern of reaction that began as light touching the first eye. The Cambrian is gone, but it is also here in every living thing that moves, feeds, feels. It is not history, it is inheritance. The ocean breathes in rhythm with the turning earth. For hundreds of millions of years, it has been the cradle of everything that lives, and within it, evolution continues to unfold in silence. The Cambrian bloom has filled the seas with color and motion, but even this abundance is not the end of change. Life never pauses, it only transforms. I imagine the tides drawing back and forth under the pale light of the moon, pulling against the edges of continents that are only now beginning to find their shapes. The land is still barren, a vast expanse of stone and dust, carved by wind, unsoftened by roots. Yet something invisible begins to reach toward it, a quiet yearning from the sea toward the world above. At first, it is nothing more than presence. Tiny films of algae cling to damp rock where the waves recede. They grow, spread dry, and die only to return again with each new tide. In this cycle of wet and dry, a new resilience begins to form, the first hint that life can endure beyond the sea. I stand at that ancient shore in thought, watching the tide retreat. The rocks glisten black and slick. The air shimmers with heat. And on the stone, under the faintest layer of moisture, I see it, a faint smear of green, the first color of land. It is strange how small beginnings always seem. A few strands of life clinging to the edge of the impossible. Yet this is how all revolutions begin, not with thunder, but with persistence. The algae breathe sunlight, storing energy, exhaling oxygen. Each day they hold on a little longer, drying less quickly, adapting more surely. Over millions of years they change. They build new molecules to resist desiccation, new structures to anchor themselves, new strategies to survive the absence of buoyant water. And one day, they do not die when the tide recedes. That small victory, invisible unnoticed, is the start of everything. The first plants, or what will become plants, have arrived on land. I picture them spreading slowly across the coastlines, forming dark green patches between the rocks, creeping into tidal flats. Rain falls upon them. Wind scatters their spores. They do not yet have roots or leaves, but they have purpose. With each passing generation, they learn to hold more water, to gather more light, to live just a little farther from the waves. The land for the first time begins to turn green. It is not yet lush, not yet forested, but the transformation has begun. The air changes. The amount of oxygen rises. The carbon dioxide falls. The cycle of day and night begins to matter in new ways. Light not only illuminates, but sustains. The earth is beginning to breathe through its surface. The rocks crack beneath the roots of lichens, partnerships between fungi and algae that learn to cooperate for survival. The fungus provides shelter and minerals. The alga provides energy. Together, they do what neither could. Alone, they turn stone into soil. This soil, thin, young, and raw, is the first memory of land's awakening. It catches rainfall, holds nutrients, and allows new life to take hold. I imagine walking across that newborn ground. The texture is strange, soft in places, rough in others. Patches of moss-like plants rise only an inch or two. The air smells of minerals and dampness. The horizon is empty, except for the low curve of the sea and the pale, endless sky. No sound of birds, no hum of insects, only wind and the distant crash of waves. But beneath the surface, the world is already alive. Worm-like creatures, the descendants of marine invertebrates, burrow into the damp soil, feeding on organic debris. Small arthropods crawl from the sea, their bodies armored, their limbs jointed. They breathe air through primitive spiracles, experimenting with existence beyond the tide. Some return to the water, others stay. Every attempt is an experiment, every failure a lesson written into evolution's code. Time passes and the green deepens. The first true vascular plants appear with stems to hold them upright and channels to carry water from root to tip. They rise taller, reaching for the light, anchoring themselves in the soil. Their shadows stretch longer across the ground. Each leaf that falls becomes nourishment for the next generation. The land learns how to recycle. I kneel in imagination among these early forests, if one can call them that. They are small, waist-high perhaps, with thin stems and delicate fronds. But they are forests in spirit, dense living, transforming the landscape around them. The air grows thick with oxygen, and for the first time, weather begins to shape ecosystems. Rain collects in pools, forming ponds and rivers. The cycle of erosion begins, carving the first valleys, feeding the growing green. The earth, once bare and silent, begins to soften. The oceans, though still dominant, no longer hold all of life. The balance is shifting. From the shallows, new creatures emerge, arthropods, mollusks, and the ancestors of fish. Fins grow stronger, bones more defined. Some begin to use their fins not only to swim, but to push against the bottom to prop themselves upright. Each motion is an act of defiance, a step toward a world not yet theirs. I imagine one such creature, its body sleek, its skin dark and glistening. It lives near the shoreline where tides rise and fall. When the tide is high, it feeds among the corals and reeds. When it falls, it flops between pools, gasping. Each time it endures a little longer outside the water. Inside its body, something new is forming, lungs born from the modification of swim bladders. The first breath of air. The first inhale of freedom. It is clumsy, awkward, incomplete, but it works. And because it works, it will be remembered. Generations pass. Fins become stronger, bones thicker, limbs evolve joints. The eyes once built to see through water begin to adjust to the air. Life for the first time looks across the land. The world above is harsh, no shelter, no moisture, no safety. But it is also vast, limitless, unexplored. The amphibians' descendants of those lungfish pioneers emerge from the water's edge in cautious steps. Their skin glistens, drying quickly in the heat. They move in bursts forward, rest, breathe, return. They are explorers in a world of risk. I stand there in imagination, watching them. The ground beneath their feet is still damp from the tide. The plants whisper in the wind, the first sound of leaves brushing one another. The air smells of wet earth and salt, and as one creature hesitates, then pushes forward, the history of all terrestrial life begins. It is not a heroic moment. There is no triumph, no awareness of destiny. Just the quiet persistence of existence finding new ground. The land responds. Plants grow larger, their stems thickening into trunks. Ferns appear, spreading vast fronds that drink in sunlight. Roots dig deeper, binding soil, stabilizing rivers. Swamps form rich and dark, filled with decay and renewal. The sky, now rich in oxygen, glows brighter. Lightning flickers across the horizon, feeding nitrogen into the soil. The atmosphere hums with potential energy. I picture a day in this new world, the sun rising over a landscape of moss ferns and shallow pools. Mist rises where the rivers meet the sea. Insects newly evolved from marine arthropods crawl along the damp ground. Wings, delicate and transparent, shimmer in the air for the first time. The sound of wind moves through the ferns, and I realize the world is no longer silent. The music of land has begun, the whisper of leaves, the rustle of wings, the distant croak of amphibians. Everything that will ever walk or fly is contained in these first movements. The air grows dense with life. Oxygen levels rise to heights the planet will rarely see again. Fire becomes possible, a byproduct of abundance. Lightning strikes forests, and they burn, returning nutrients to the soil. The cycle of destruction and renewal is reborn on land. I wander through this imagined forest and feel the pulse of it, not fast but steady. Each plant, each insect, each amphibian plays a part in maintaining the balance. Photosynthesis pulls carbon from the air. Respiration returns it. Rain falls, rivers carry minerals back to the sea. The land and ocean are no longer separate. They are one system, one breath. The amphibians grow larger, more confident. They feed on insects and return to the water to lay their eggs. Some venture farther inland, their skin adapting slowly to dryness. Their bones grow denser, their lungs more efficient. In their tracks, the first footprints appear, shallow impressions in the mud, baked into stone by the sun. Footprints, evidence that something has crossed from one world into another. When I look at them, I feel something deeply familiar. The curve of a limb, the pattern of weight, the rhythm of movement, echoes of what I carry in my own skeleton. Evolution, it seems, never forgets its steps. Millions of years pass, and the forests grow denser, the air thicker. The swamps deepen into peat layers of dead plants, accumulating faster than they can decay. Each fallen frond becomes a page in a book that will one day turn into coal. The planet is building its memory in stone, and in that memory, I can hear the faint echoes of every storm, every breath, every first step. The Earth. Once a world of water has found its second homeland, and life, patient and persistent, has learned to move between the two. Mist clings to the surface of the water as the dawn spreads across a world that has become green. The air is heavy, thick with moisture and the scent of decay. The forest breathes as a single body, its leaves trembling beneath the first light of morning. Everywhere there is life, not just in the sea now, but on the land, in the air, beneath the soil. What began as scattered moss and fragile reeds has become an empire of trees. Trunks rise straight and tall, their bark dark and rough, their crowns disappearing into the haze above. The ground beneath is soft and deep, layered with fallen fronds and damp soil. The air tastes different here. Oxygen fills every breath, rich, almost intoxicating. Each inhalation would feel thicker, warmer, more alive. I imagine walking through that forest, the sound of dripping water all around the floor, yielding underfoot, and the light filtering in shafts through towering ferns. The trees are unlike those of the present world. They have no flowers, no seeds as we know them. They are lycophytes, horsetails, and towering club mosses, plants that grow by spores, not blossoms. Their leaves are stiff, their stems hollow, their roots shallow but widespread. Some stretch over 30 meters into the mist, pillars of green beneath a gray sky. At their bases, the first true soils form dark, spongy, alive. Fungi spread through the ground in long branching threads, breaking down wood and leaf, feeding nutrients back into the cycle. The earth has built its first self-sustaining ecosystem, a balance between decay and growth, birth and return. The forest hums, not with sound as I know it, but with movement, rhythm, vibration. Small arthropods crawl across fallen leaves, millipedes longer than my arm, their bodies glistening in the dim light. Insects as wide as birds cling to the trunks, their wings patterned with delicate veins. Dragonflies, enormous and slow, drift through the air, with wings that span the length of a human forearm. They move lazily, unafraid. In this oxygen-rich world, everything grows large. Their bodies can support sizes impossible in any later age. The air is their element, and they fill it with silent flight. Amphibians, too, have grown in scale. They lie half-submerged in still pools, their wide eyes breaking the surface watching. Their skin is slick, their lungs deep. Some hunt insects along the forest floor. Others slide back into the water to spawn. Their bodies bridge two worlds, the ancient and the new, water and land. I imagine standing beside one of those pools, the air heavy and still, a faint shimmer of heat rising from the ground. A ripple crosses the surface, a tail, a limb, the brief flash of an eye. Then stillness again. The forest holds its breath. Everywhere, moisture. This is a world of water and shade, of breath and rot. Each leaf that falls begins to decay, almost immediately consumed by bacteria and fungus. The smell of life and death mingles, rich and dense. Lightning flashes far away, illuminating the canopy. The thunder comes later, low and distant. Rain begins to fall, large drops, slow and heavy. The forest drinks it eagerly. Rivers swell, filling the lowlands, and the swamps deepen. The water here is dark, stained with tannins and minerals, thick with organic matter. In its depths, dead plants sink slowly into the mud, layer upon layer, preserved by the stillness of the airless swamp. These layers will one day become coal-black stone, born of green abundance. But for now, they are only memory in the making, each leaf a line in a story the planet is writing for itself. The forest is old but alive, ancient but restless. Evolution continues its quiet experiments. New insects emerge, beetles with armored shells, crickets that chirp in the humid air. The first true wings evolve for gliding, then for flight. In the shallows, amphibians grow teeth jaws and hunger. Some begin to linger longer on land, their skin thicker, their eggs laid in safer places. Their legs strengthen, their movements become surer, and among them the first reptiles appear. Small at first, almost fragile, they are the descendants of amphibians who refuse to return to the water. They carry their young within eggs protected by hard shells, safe from drying out. It is a small change, but it changes everything. With that single innovation, life breaks its final tie to the sea. I watch them in my mind's eye, small, sleek, scaled. They move quietly through the undergrowth, their heads lifting, tongues flicking. Their movements are deliberate, cautious. They are the first creatures truly of the land, breathing dry air, basking in sunlight. Each breath they take is a victory millions of years in the making. Above them, the forest canopy ripples with movement. Ferns and club mosses tower overhead. The air is heavy with spores drifting like dust. Light filters down in thin golden beams glinting on the wet bark and the wings of insects. Everywhere, life is layered upon life, plants growing on fallen trunks, mosses feeding on trees, fungi feeding on both. The entire forest is a living continuum of energy and decay. I walk deeper into it in thought. The sounds shift: the faint hum of insects, the croak of amphibians, the creak of trees swaying in the slow wind. It is humid beyond comfort, every surface slick, every breath thick. Yet it feels alive in a way few worlds ever will again. This is the height of the Carboniferous world, the Green Kingdom, the age of oxygen. The balance, however, is precarious. The same abundance that fuels growth also feeds instability. With so much plant matter capturing carbon, the atmosphere changes again. Carbon dioxide drops, the climate cools. Ice returns to the poles, subtle at first, then more certain. The forests continue to grow, but the seasons begin to shift. The world of eternal wetness starts to fracture. Regions dry, others flood. The great swamps recede, replaced by rivers and open plains. Change once again calls for adaptation. Amphibians that depend on constant water struggle. Reptiles with their sealed eggs and dry skin flourish. The balance tilts in their favor. The age of amphibians wanes, and the world begins to prepare for the reign of reptiles. But for now, I linger in this forest in the thick of its breath. I listen to the rain fade, to the hum of insects resume, to the slow pulse of the living planet. When I close my eyes, I can almost feel the humidity on my skin, the scent of wet soil, the faint vibration of thunder traveling through the ground. It is not imagination. It is memory. Memory of what the earth once was and still is, deep beneath the layers of time. Every forest since has carried echoes of this one. Every leaf that falls, every breeze that moves through branches, every flame that burns wood, all trace their lineage back to this carboniferous breath. And though the world will change, though continents will drift and species will vanish, the rhythm that began here, the exchange of air, balance of life and decay, will continue forever. The forest exhales. I breathe with it. The sun hangs lower now in a sky that is beginning to harden into seasons. The great wet green of the Carboniferous has not vanished overnight, but it has been altered, stretched, compressed, reshaped by forces that operate on scales and times too slow for a single life to register. There is a dryness in the air today that did not exist before, a thinness that makes the breath feel different. If I close my eyes and breathe with the memory of that ancient world, the inhale is heavier at the start of the Carboniferous, and the exhale grows thinner as the continents shift and climates change. I stand on a slope of weathered stone that once lay beneath a forest so dense it felt like the planet itself. The ferns and club mosses that reached for light have receded in the mind of time. Their great swamps that stored so much carbon have been compressed into seams of black stone, the coal of our later fires and furnaces. But here in this moment, I imagine they still stand in fragments, trunks and fronds, arranged like the pages of a book halfway read. The ground is spongy underfoot, though patches are firming where drainage begins, where water does not linger. What makes the shift visible is not the sudden absence of green, but the new textures of the world. The rivers run lower between seasons, exposing banks once hidden. The pebble beds harden, become braided channels that stir dust in dry wind. The broad swamps shrink to pockets protected by topography and shade. In these shifting margins, the ecotones between wet and dry life learn something essential, the art of endurance in the face of intermittent scarcity. Life's adaptations do not announce themselves. They are small, almost trivial at first, a slight thickening of a cuticle around an insect's spiracles to conserve water, a deeper rooting habit in a plant, so its stem can tap groundwater when rains fail. But iteration compounds. Generations accumulate changes, some barely detectable until they have become a new way of living. Insects that once pushed their wings through the dense, humid air will find that those same wings enable them to cross longer stretches of open ground between shrubby refuges. Flight, in other words, becomes not just a way to forage, but a dispersal strategy across an increasingly patchy landscape. I watch in thought a dragonfly the size of a falcon glide over a thinning swamp. Its wings beat with a languid power that would be impossible in our oxygen-sparse age. You have to remember how different the atmosphere was, oxygen-saturated to levels foolishly generous by later standards, allowing nervous systems and muscular tissues to support greater mass and energy. It is partly this abundance of oxygen that allows so many lineages to experiment with scale. But abundance creates its own instability. Where there is lots of fuel fires are more likely lightning that once only scorched single trees now sparks conflagrations that reshape entire landscapes, clearing forest and returning nutrients to soil in a sudden wash of mineral light. These fires are natural, periodic, and evolutionary. They prune the old and open niches for the new. On the forest floor, amphibians still move and thrive where ponds and streams remain, but the rise of better eggs, amniotic eggs with shells that resist desiccation, marks a quiet revolution. The first reptiles are not dramatic tyrants. They are small, secretive scaling out of ponds onto damp leaf litter and then stepping farther. The amniote egg is not merely an innovation in reproduction. It is an emancipation. It severs the tie to water that had chained most vertebrates since their origin. Where amphibians still need the water's margin for reproduction, amniotes can bury their embryos in drier, more varied substrates. It is a pathway towards independence from aquatic life. I follow one such creature across the loosening humus. Its scales glint with a slight sheen. It moves with the deliberate economical gait of an animal not built for the swamp, but for the land's new solidity. Its nostrils flick, sampling humidity and scent. For now, it still returns to the water in heat and drought, but its eggs will not drown should a storm fail. The world has suddenly broadened for it. Plant life, too, changes. Seed plants begin to proliferate in patches where spores alone had once held sway. Seeds with their protective coats and nutrient caches can tolerate moments of dryness and disperse over distances that spores could not reliably traverse. Gymnosperms rise in prominence in these marginal environments. They are hardier and can cling to ridges and slopes where peat once accumulated. Their cones are crude, but their seeds are a powerful insurance policy against the vagaries of weather. When I pick up a fallen seed for a moment in thought, its surface is rough but purposeful. It is an investment little more than an embryo wrapped in food and armor. Over tens of thousands of seasons, these small investments add up into forests that are not the same as the Carboniferous swamps. They are more open, composed of trees with different growth strategies, with spaced crowns and less densely stacked understories. The world is growing more heterogeneous, an archipelago of environmental types, where the old homogeneous coal swamps are fragmented and trimmed. This heterogeneity gives rise to new ecological machines. Where rivers are now more variable, intermittent pools form. These pools are ecological crucibles, concentrations of organisms that for a season are abundant, playful, brutal. Larval assemblages of amphibians and insects proliferate here, their boom and bust cycles forcing life cycles to compress and synchronize. Predators attend these rallies with predictable regularity. The dozens of frogs and larvae drawn to the season's first rains are a banquet, and the reptiles learn to time reproduction to such pulses. I sense, too, the slow march toward continental assembly. Continents once scattered begin to gather. Plate motions that had been leisurely for eons now conspire to fold ocean basins closed and fling mountain chains upward. The supercontinent, that will be called Pangaea, ranges in the imagination as a slow grinding mosaic of collisions, microcontinents, docking sutures, forming inland seas, closing like a fist. These tectonic changes alter global patterns of moisture and wind. Where central basins become bound, their climates dry. Where orographic rain falls, narrow ranges grow lusher, an uneven sculpted planet. The climatic signal for life is crucial. Aridity begets selection for water economy and behavioral plasticity. No longer is the strategy merely to grow large in an oxygen-laden world. Now to persist, one must be agile in timing, in habitat selection, in reproductive strategy. The reptiles, with their egg armor, their tougher skin, and more efficient kidneys, find advantage. They begin to radiate in form and function. If I focus on a single lineage for a stretch, I see evolutionary investment in locomotion, in integumentary defenses in sensory systems that track ephemeral prey across open ground. Limbs become more capable of bearing the body's weight over substrate that yields less forgivingly than water. Vertebral columns adapt to axial loading muscles, reorganize around new gaits. Feet spread or narrow to negotiate mudleaf litter or firm ground. Snouts elongate or shorten according to feeding strategy. Eyes may become more front-facing for depth perception among active predators or laterally orientated in ambush hunters. Each morphological turn an answer to a specific set of ecological pressures. Insects do not lag in this transformation. Their wing structures become more refined joints, more articulated. The early protowings that had once served passive gliding now facilitate targeted flight with greater maneuverability. In this drying world, flight becomes a tool for escape and exploration. These insects colonize open spaces, visit scattered waterholes, disperse seeds and pollen, a mutualism that plants come to exploit with increasingly complex structures. Pollination begins as a crude co-occurrence and matures into one of the most potent reciprocities in the history of life. I trace the story of the first pollinators in quiet imaginings. An insect lands for moisture on a seed cone or atop sticky microsporangia. Pollen clings to its body. The insect flies in sights pollen transfer. Seeds in turn find new ground to colonize. These are small, ineffable interactions, but in aggregate they define ecosystems. When plants have effective dispersal vectors like mobile insects, their expansion into patchy habitats becomes more productive. And there is smell too, a sense we often undervalue in human-centric thinking. Olfactory cues feed decisions about mating, feeding, and migration. The drying world magnifies chemical signals across air rather than water. And organisms that can track humidity, gradients, and pheromone plumes gain a distinct edge. Reptiles and insects both exploit these airborne scents and evolution of behavior as much as morphology. It is worth noting that none of these transitions are simultaneous across the globe. Mountains, basins, coasts, and inland seas all experience change at different rhythms. In one place, bogs still stand, mosses still dominate, and amphibians remain abundant. In another, broad plains host hordes of scaled reptiles and winged insects. The planet becomes a mosaic of biomes. This heterogeneity itself fosters speciation. Different selective regimes produce nested radiations of forms. Isolation breeds novelty. I imagine the soundscape in those varied places. In a drying plain, the whistles and clicks of insects pervade. A distant rustle marks the passage of a small reptilian predator. The wind carrying silt sings across low grasses and sparse shrubs. In a lingering swamp, the chorus of amphibians and the whir of giant insect wings create a thick, wet band of sound. Each biome is its own acoustic fingerprint, another layer of Earth's memory. Evolution is a sculptor working with a material that is partly constraint and partly opportunity. For organisms, constraint is the chemical and physical condition of the world: oxygen, abundance, temperature, availability of water. Opportunity is the set of niches opened by previous forms, empty spaces left when a competitor goes extinct, novel microhabitats created by a new plant, architecture, a temporary pool left by a receding river. Over eras, the balance of constraint and opportunity waxes and wanes. In the epoch I imagine the narrative entering now, opportunity tilts toward organisms that can flex their life cycles and strategies to a more variable world. With these shifts come certain innovations in physiology that we should pause with for a moment. Renal systems in amniotes streamline, for example, producing more concentrated urine to conserve water. Skin morphology alters with keratinized scales, limiting transcutaneous water loss. Behavioral thermoregulation, the simple act of basking to raise body temperature and then retreating to shade to avoid overheating, gives rise to predictable daily patterns that influence everything from foraging to reproductive timing. The implications ripple daily thermal cycles, structure activity patterns, and in turn, predator-prey dynamics and competition. At the scale of communities, new trophic arrangements emerge. Herbivores on land diversify to exploit seed plants, early gymnosperms, and other tough fibrous tissues. Digestive systems in some lineages evolve toward longer guts and specialized microflora to break down cellulose and lignin. Predators diversify in turn, evolving more complex dentition capable of slicing and crushing tough plant matter, and the robust musculature to pursue more mobile prey. Food webs thicken and gain complexity, and life engineering becomes visible in a new way. Animals reshape the landscape, burrows, loosen soil, and create microhabitats. Trampling by herds compacts ground and affects drainage. The selective grazing of herbivores influences plant community composition. These are feedbacks organisms not only respond to their environment, but actively change it. Over millennia, such activity can alter soil horizons, change the frequency of fires by affecting fuel distribution, and redirect watercourses. The planet's physical template and its biological inhabitants become reciprocally entangled. I turn now to a quieter narrative, one of extinction, whispered not in suddenness, but in slow attrition. As Pangaea completes its assembly and ocean basins shrink, the ocean's circulation changes. Nutrient flows shift. Certain marine provinces grow impoverished, while others receive concentrated upwelling. Such rearrangements set the stage for marine faunal turnovers that will later be catastrophic in scale. But on land, the compression of geography means that climatic belts expand across continental interiors. Aridity becomes more widespread in the heart of the supercontinent. Species adapted to moist coastal environments find themselves truncated in range. Some retreat to refugia, isolated pockets of suitable habitat, where microclimates preserve particular assemblages. Others fail. Refugia are instructive. They are evolutionary crucibles where small populations undergo rapid divergence due to isolation and drift. The early reptiles that linger in moist river valleys diverge in behavior and morphology from their sister taxa on the drying plains. Over time, this insular differentiation can lead to narrower niches and later to bursts of speciation when corridors open again. The paradox of isolation is that it both endangers and accelerates novelty. Humanly, I try to imagine the sensation of living through long-term drying, not a single catastrophic event, but a sequence of toughening seasons, years of lower rainfall, a trend of cooler winters interspersed with violent summers. It changes how organisms allocate resources. It changes reproductive timing. It changes life expectancy. There is a sharpening of selection toward individuals that can forego immediate reproduction in favor of survival through lean seasons, an economy of life that values reserve and patience. These are the subtle shifts that often precede major radiations. And yet, life's response to such pressure is not uniform. Opportunistic lineages proliferate, exploiting fast-changing environments with high fecundity and generalist diets. K-selected strategies slower growth. Fewer offspring, higher parental investment may persist in refugia, where competition is intense, but resource flux is moderate. The planet in this chapter hosts both strategies in varying mosaics. I watch in thought as a mixed assemblage assembles along an ephemeral river. Enormous arthropods that graze on fern fronds, small reptilian predators that stalk and pounce amphibians that use the water for life stage transitions, and insect pollinators that traverse between scattered seed-bearing plants. The interplay among these groups is relentless. Predation pressures select for better sensing, which selects for stealth, which pushes herbivores into novel feeding strategies. The co-evolutionary dance spins tighter the longer it plays. That dance includes, at a crucial point, the elaboration of sociality in some lineages. Social behaviors pack hunting colonial nesting. Cooperative defense arise not as inevitable endpoints, but as successful strategies in specific contexts, habitats with patchy resources, high predation risk, or where group foraging yields better returns. The early signals of social complexity are small, an adult protecting young from conspecifics, a pair coordinating in food transport, but they lay groundwork for later, more complex social structures. These emergent behaviors have consequences for energy distribution within populations and for the dynamics of cultural transmission, where behavioral patterns are learned rather than strictly genetically encoded. As the narrative thread of ecosystems weaves onward, another actor becomes harder to ignore: fire. In the drier world, fire is not only more common, it is more influential. Lightning strikes in open woodlands regularly ignite ground fuels. The resulting burns, clear understory release mineral nutrients from ash, create a mosaic of successional patches that support different assemblages at various stages. Species adapt to this cycle not always by resistance, but sometimes by taking advantage seeds that germinate after fire. Herbivores that exploit the nutrient flush of new growth. Fire becomes an ecological engineer just as much as any burrower or beaver will be in later ages. Over many millennia, the choreography of these interactions, reproduction, dispersal, predation, disease, fire, and geological change, produces a world of much greater diversity than the earlier homogeneous swamps. Reptiles proliferate into numerous families, occupying niches from ground-dwelling insectivores to more cursorial predators. Insects fly and pollinate. Plants spread their seeds and colonize new soils. Fungi decompose and recycle. From the vantage point of time, it is tempting to call this era the age where terrestrial life came into its own, but such labels simplify the messy tapestry of life. There is no single takeover. There is a slow seeding and contest over habitats, a negotiation in which various strategies win in different locales and times. Yet there is no question that the balance of life is shifting toward organisms whose life cycles and morphologies are tuned to terrestrial existence. I find myself considering the geological mirror to this biological unfolding. Mountain ranges carved by the collisions that assembled the supercontinent redirect atmospheric circulation. Rain shadows fall on one side, hyperhumid valleys on the other. Rivers shift courses under orogenic uplift, cutting new canyons and depositing fresh alluvial plains downstream. These geological acts are slow, but because life is persistent, even slow changes produce profound evolutionary feedback. A new range might isolate a population, and through isolation, produce a lineage that will later colonize entire new islands of climate space. The final image I let settle is not dramatic. It is a simple silhouette of a small, scaled animal on a ridge at dusk, tongue-flicking nostrils, tasting humidity. Its eyes catch the last light. Below, in a distant lowland, a rainstorm grumbles, and a flash of lightning touches the ground. Somewhere, a colony of insects takes wing, their iridescent bodies drifting like dust. This tableau is ordinary and yet enormous ordinary because it is daily life. Enormous because it represents a planetary shift where life has mastered mobility beyond water and now governs landscapes altering atmosphere and lithosphere in turn. In the overall arc, the world has grown more complicated. That complexity is not a promise of stability. Indeed, it can presage upheaval. But it is a promise of possibility of forms and behaviors we would not otherwise imagine. The more niches there are, the more evolutionary experiments can be run. And as the end of this chapter, I feel the world poised between the finitude of older ecosystems and the storm of novel radiations that will characterize later eras, reptiles in many shapes, insects in bewildering variety, plants with more resilient strategies, and a planet whose face is becoming a patchwork of microclimates. I breathe out slowly and return for a moment to the rain tapping against my present window wall, ordinary drops, steady as memory. The continuity from that imagined ridge to this near rain is what I carry with me. Life that once learned to hold ground in the face of drying has become the ancestor of almost everything that moves on land today. The ancient experiment in adaptation continues in every breath we draw in the resilience and fragility of our ecosystems. The wind is drier now. It carries dust instead of mist, and the scent of vegetation is faint, almost brittle. When I breathe, I can taste the thinness of the air, still full of life, still oxygen-rich, but lacking the lush humidity that once made the forests sing. The age of green swamps and endless moisture is gone. The world has entered another rhythm, slower, harsher, older. I can feel the continents pressing together. The Earth's crust groans under its own ambition, as if every landmass longs to be part of something greater. The plates have merged into a single sprawling supercontinent Pangaea, and across its surface, a new kind of silence spreads. Where there were once scattered islands and shallow seas, now there is land endless wide and unforgiving. Inland regions far from the ocean's moderating touch bake under a relentless sun by day and freeze under starlit skies by night. The coasts still breathe with rain and growth, but the interiors, the vast deserts and plains, whisper only dust. I imagine standing on a ridge of red stone beneath a cloudless sky. The horizon burns with heat, the air shimmers, and the wind carries grains of sand that sting the skin. Behind me in the distance lies a forest not lush and wet like before, but a dry woodland of conifers, cycads, and seed ferns. Their trunks twist in the dry air, their roots digging deep into soil that remembers the rain, but seldom feels it. This is the Permian world, a planet reinventing itself through scarcity. The plants have changed first, as they always do. The great spore-bearing trees that ruled the Carboniferous are mostly gone, unable to cope with the dryness. In their place rise the gymnosperms, plants that bear seeds openly armored against the loss of water. Pines, cycads, ginkgos, their ancestors now stretch across Pangaea's ridges and plateaus, building the first dry forests in Earth's history. Their needles glint in the hard sunlight. Their roots hold the soil against the erosive winds. When the rare rains come, they drink deeply and wait, conserving every drop. Evolution has made them patient. The animals follow their lead. The amphibians retreat toward the remaining rivers and lakes, their wet skin ill-suited to this drier world. Reptiles, by contrast, thrive. They have the advantage of skin sealed against desiccation and eggs that can survive under the open sky. Their lungs are efficient, their bodies compact and sturdy. In the new forests, reptilian life begins to diversify into astonishing forms. Some are small, nimble, and insectivorous, darting across the leaf litter in pursuit of crickets and beetles. Others grow massive, lumbering through the dry valleys, their limbs strong enough to bear their own weight on solid ground. I walk among them in imagination. The soundscape is unfamiliar, not the chorus of frogs and dragonflies, but the rustle of dry leaves, the occasional hiss or bellow of reptiles staking their claim. The air is warm, filled with the smell of resin and dust. And in this world of reptiles, a new kind of lineage begins to emerge. Their bodies grow larger, their teeth sharper, their bones thicker. Their jaws can crush their limbs, can stride. Their hearts and lungs evolve to deliver oxygen more efficiently, allowing greater endurance. Some become hunters, sleek predatory forms that stalk and ambush. Others turn to the vegetation, their teeth adapting to grind tough conifer needles and fibrous ferns. The diversity is remarkable. It is the dawn of the synapsids, the mammal-like reptiles. Their skulls show openings for stronger jaw muscles. Their bodies are warm-adapted, their postures more upright. They breathe deeper, move faster, think differently. When I see them in thought, I recognize something hauntingly familiar. Their faces carry a strange intelligence, not human, not even mammalian yet, but awake in a way the reptiles before them were not. Their eyes follow, calculate, remember. They are the Earth's first hint of the creatures that will one day nurse their young and dream beneath the stars. The synapsids dominate the Permian plains. Some, like Dimetrodon, grow immense, their backs crowned with tall sails of bone and skin, perhaps to regulate heat in a world where days and nights swing between extremes. Others are smaller, burrowing into the soil to escape the searing sun. In their dens, they huddle together, conserving warmth and life. I sit with them in imagination as the wind howls above. The ground is cool, the darkness soft. The sound of breathing, slow, rhythmic, alive, fills the burrow. Outside, the land is vast, indifferent. Inside, there is warmth. Time flows differently now. The Permian spans nearly 50 million years, long enough for continents to move, for species to rise and vanish, for climates to shift again and again. It is not a single age, but a sequence of adjustments, a delicate balance between abundance and collapse. The oceans, too, are changing. Their chemistry altered by shifting landmasses, and volcanic emissions grows unstable. Currents weaken, oxygen levels fluctuate. In the shallows, coral reefs form, flourish, and die back in cycles. The deep ocean begins to stagnate. Life continues, but unease lingers beneath the surface. On land, ecosystems mature into intricate networks. Herbivores and predators form chains of dependency more complex than ever before. Insects pollinate the early seed plants. Amphibians cling to the last wetlands. Reptiles and synapsids dominate the uplands. And yet, beneath this vitality, the Earth stirs with restlessness. The supercontinent traps heat within its massive interior. Volcanic activity increases along its edges, releasing gases that thicken the air with carbon dioxide. Temperatures rise, rain patterns shift, forests wither in places once green. I can almost smell it, that faint tang of sulfur, that heavy stillness before the rain that never comes. In some regions, drought lasts not for years, but for centuries. Rivers dry into salt flats. Plants retreat toward mountain valleys. Animals follow or perish. The resilience that once made life thrive now becomes its test. Still, some endure. In burrows, in shaded canyons, in the depths of the few remaining lakes, life holds on. Seeds wait in the dust. Eggs sleep in the soil. The earth does not give up easily. Then, slowly, the sky begins to darken, not with storm clouds, but with something deeper, something from within. From fissures across what is now Siberia, the earth begins to bleed fire. For years, for centuries, the ground erupts in waves of molten basalt, pouring across the land in sheets hundreds of feet thick. The Siberian traps, as they will later be called, become one of the largest volcanic events in the planet's history. The air fills with ash, sulfur dioxide, and carbon dioxide. The oceans absorb the gases, turning acidic. The sky glows red even at noon. Acid rain falls. Temperatures swing wildly, first cold as aerosols block sunlight, then blistering hot as greenhouse gases build up. It is as if the Earth itself has begun to fever. I try to picture it, a world half in darkness, half in flame. The forests once resilient burn to ash. Rivers boil and dry. The oxygen-rich air that once nourished giants now becomes a trap feeding wildfires that rage for centuries. The oceans turn anoxic, their surfaces choked with bacteria, their depths starved of life. And life, for all its endurance, begins to fail. The synapsids, those promising creatures, dwindle. The amphibians vanish from the interiors. Insects, once innumerable, fall silent. Coral reefs dissolve. Species that took millions of years to evolve disappear in a geological instant. It is called the Great Dying, the most catastrophic extinction in Earth's history. 90% of all marine life gone. 70% of all terrestrial species gone. Entire ecosystems erased. It is as if the Earth has reset itself, a pause, a silence, a void. I imagine walking through that silence. The air is still, the ground cracked. The horizon glows faintly from the haze of volcanic dust. A single tree stands blackened but upright. There are no birds, no insects, no sound but the faint hiss of wind across stone. And yet, beneath the surface, in burrows and sediments, something remains. Spores, seeds, eggs, bacteria, fragments of persistence waiting. The Earth has died before. It will live again. When the skies clear, when the lava cools, when the rains return, life will crawl out once more. The survivors will be different. Smaller, tougher, more adaptable. Among them will be the ancestors of what comes next. The archosaurs, the line that will give rise to dinosaurs and birds, and the small nocturnal synapsids that will one day become mammals. It will take millions of years, but the silence will end. The Earth, scarred and scarlet, will turn its face once again toward life. The fires did not stop for lifetimes. They came and went like seasons, except that no season could end them. The sky was heavy, not with clouds, but with ash. It was a gray that swallowed the sun, a gray that fell slowly, steadily, covering everything in a blanket of silence. For thousands of years the Earth smoldered. Rivers turned to vapor. Forests became charcoal. The seas shimmered under a haze of methane and steam. Even the wind seemed tired, thick, sluggish, carrying only the scent of sulfur and dust. But beneath the ruin, beneath the blackened crust, life still pulsed. If I close my eyes, I can see it, microscopic forms huddled in thermal vents, bacterial colonies feeding on minerals, not sunlight. Life retreated inward, not outward. The surface had become uninhabitable, but the deep, the dark still offered sanctuary. There, in the shadowed places, in cracks in the basalt, in the pores of rock, life persisted, patient as stone. It is easy from a distance to call it extinction. 90% of species gone, entire ecosystems erased. But extinction is never pure emptiness. It is transformation through suffering. The Permian Earth was not lifeless. It was in recovery, gasping through the fever of its own rebirth. The survivors were the ones who adapted to scarcity, to toxic air, to unstable climate, to silence. Among the synapsids, a few lineages endured in burrows and shaded valleys, feeding on roots and carrion. Among the reptiles, small, quick-bodied species found safety in crevices. Amphibians vanished almost entirely, but not completely. In isolated wetlands, a few hung on. Insects. The once masters of air fell in number so drastically that the skies grew still. The hum that had filled the Carboniferous and Permian forests ceased. Yet even there, in the detritus of fallen leaves and soot, A few beetles and cockroaches carried on their bodies, resistant, their cycles short, their numbers few, but unbroken. When I imagine that silence, the world stripped to its simplest sounds, I feel both terror and peace. No bird calls, no rustling of leaves, only wind and the distant crackle of fire over barren ground. And still, somewhere, something breathes. The years turn slowly. The volcanism that birthed the Siberian traps does not last forever. The eruptions fade, the skies begin to clear, and light returns to the surface. The air, though still heavy with carbon dioxide, warms into stability. Rain begins again. It is not gentle at first. It comes in torrents, hammering the ground, carving channels into the black rock. The rains wash the ash into rivers that had not flowed for centuries. They carry nutrients, minerals, and silt toward the lowlands. The earth begins to regreen itself hesitantly. The first plants to return are the pioneers, hardy, low-growing species that can tolerate acid soil and extreme temperature. Mosses and ferns creep into the cracks of stone. Over generations, they hold water again, trapping soil, creating small patches of life. In their shade, the spores of seed plants begin to germinate. It is always like this after a catastrophe, life rebuilding from the bottom. Where once forests towered, now the land is covered in miniature green, fragile but unstoppable. The air begins to smell again of organic things, wet soil resin, the faint sweetness of new growth. Insects follow. At first, only the smallest scavengers that feed on decaying matter. But soon, wings return to the sky. Beetles, dragonflies, primitive wasps. Their presence changes everything because where insects go, pollination follows. The rhythm of reproduction begins again. Reptiles too reclaim the land. The survivors have become tougher, smaller, faster, more efficient. They have endured heat, drought, and scarcity. Now, as the climate stabilizes, they spread. Their scales shimmer under a pale sun. Their eggs harden against drying. Their eyes blink in the bright light. These are not the same creatures that dominated before. Evolution, in its quiet arithmetic, has rewritten them. Some grow lean and swift, built for speed and ambush. Others grow armored, built for endurance. They move across the cooling lava fields, hunting insects, digging burrows, testing the boundaries of this reborn planet. The synapsids, those mammal-like reptiles, also return. But they are fewer now, smaller, humbler. Gone are the sail-backed giants. In their place are compact, warm-blooded survivors. Their bones show new adaptations, more complex jaws, differentiated teeth, perhaps even early fur. They live at night when the heat is low and predators rest. They scavenge, dig, sleep in hidden dens. And though they seem insignificant beside the larger reptiles, their story is not over. They are the seeds of the future. As the world cools further, oceans reoxygenate. Coral reefs begin to form again. Fish populations rebound. The cycle of life, once shattered, resumes its rhythm, slower, more deliberate, but steady. From above, the earth looks changed. Pangaea, vast and dry, still dominates, but its coasts glisten with new forests, its valleys darken with vegetation. The colors of the world have shifted, less deep green, more ochre and gray and silver. The skies, once red with ash, are blue again. I find beauty in that simplicity, a planet reborn, stripped of excess, rebuilt by endurance. But the memory of the extinction lingers. Even in the DNA of the survivors there are scars, genes silenced, species narrowed, diversity reduced. Evolution remembers suffering even as it forgets the dead. When I look at the fossil record of this time, I see more than bones. I see resilience. The curve of a rib, the pattern of a leaf, the shape of a burrow, all speak of adaptation, of the refusal to vanish. The earth has been destroyed many times, but destruction is not the opposite of life. It is part of its design. Each cataclysm reshapes, reorders, refines. What survives is stronger, more flexible, more capable of change. The Permian was not only an end, it was a crucible. Out of its fire, the blueprint for the next era was forged. And so, as I sit in the quiet of my own night, listening to the distant rumble of a storm, I think of that ancient world healing the soil, steaming after rain, the first insects rising into the new light, the faint movement of a reptile across the sand. The earth, once shattered, was already dreaming of its next creation. But the recovery was not instant. Millions of years passed before life truly flourished again. The carbon cycle broken by volcanism had to rebalance. The oceans choked by carbonic acid had to cleanse themselves. Microbes played their patient part. In the shallows, cyanobacteria returned to photosynthesize, pulling carbon from the air and releasing oxygen. Stromatolites, those layered colonies from Earth's earliest days, reappeared, ancient architects rebuilding what had been lost. The air slowly cleared, the temperature eased. And in this calmer world, new experiments began. Reptiles diversified wildly, exploring body plans that had never existed. Some took to the water, becoming sleek and paddle-limbed precursors of the marine reptiles that would later rule the Triassic seas. Others became gliders, leaping from rocks and cliffs, membranes stretched between elongated ribs, the first hint of flight. On land, new kinds of herbivores appeared, grazing among the early conifers and cycads. They moved in small herds, traveling between seasonal water sources. Their predators followed swift bipedal reptiles with keen senses and sharp teeth. It is strange to imagine so much energy, so much experimentation, so much hunger, all in the shadow of what had nearly ended everything. The earth itself seems quieter, older, more reflective. The storms are fewer, the skies clear. Nights are cool and vast. The constellations above are unfamiliar, the continents below reshaping. But the rhythm, the pulse of life and death, remains unchanged. I often think about resilience not as defiance, but as memory. The earth does not resist destruction, it transforms it. Each extinction becomes a chapter, each recovery a reinvention. The Permian extinction taught the planet the value of patience. It taught life how to survive in extremes, how to adapt faster, how to rebuild from almost nothing. The reptiles learned to live without water. The synapsids learned to live without sunlight. The plants learn to live without certainty. Those lessons echo through every epoch that follows, through the Triassic, the Jurassic, the Cretaceous, and beyond. As the Permian fades into memory, the Earth stands at the threshold of its next act. The survivors of fire and darkness look toward the dawn of a new empire, not yet knowing that one of them will give rise to the greatest dominance the world has ever seen. The air warms, the forests grow taller again, and in the distance, I can almost hear the faint tremor of footsteps, the first of the dinosaurs stirring. The silence of extinction is over. The age of motion begins. The earth was quiet for a long time after the great dying. Too quiet. It is strange to imagine a silence lasting millions of years, but in geological time, recovery is slow. The atmosphere needed to breathe again. The oceans needed to learn how to circulate. For a while, the planet existed like a body regaining its pulse after fever, unsteady, fragile, unsure. But life is stubborn. It always finds the smallest crack, the faintest thread of possibility, and builds from there. When I close my eyes, I can see the Triassic dawn pale light spilling across red stone. The air smells of dust and resin. The continents are still joined as Pangea, stretching from pole to pole, wrapped by the great Panthalassic Ocean. The earth is mostly desert now, vast interior plains, scorched by heat, broken only by thin green ribbons where rivers run. Yet in those narrow corridors of life, something remarkable is happening. The survivors of the Permian, the small reptiles, the burrowers, the insects, the seeds are beginning to rebuild the biosphere from the ground up. Evolution, like a sculptor, is redrawing the world with new hands. I imagine standing at the edge of one of these river valleys, the air shimmering with heat. To my left, dunes rise and fall like waves frozen in sand. To my right, water trickles through a narrow channel lined with cycads and ferns. There is life here, sparse but deliberate, a green thread against an ochre horizon. A small lizard scurries across the stones, its feet barely touching the surface. Its movements are efficient, its body compact. It pauses in the shadow of a rock, its sides pulsing with breath. This is not the fragile world of the past. This is a world of survivors, every breath calculated, every gesture precise. Above the sky is pale blue. The air is thinner than in the Carboniferous, less oxygen, less comfort, but clean. The sun burns brighter now, unfiltered by the haze that once veiled it. The plants that dominate this new age are tougher. Cycads stand like sentinels, their thick trunks crowned with rigid leaves. Ginkgos unfurl delicate fans in the morning wind. Conifers with their spiraled needles grow tall and lean along the riverbanks. These are plants that can endure drought, wind, and thin soil, the true architects of the Triassic landscape. And beneath them in the shade, animals begin to move again. The reptiles that survived the Great Dying are no longer small. Over millions of years, some have grown large, their bodies heavy, their jaws lined with sharp teeth. The first true archosaurs, the ancestors of crocodiles, pterosaurs, and dinosaurs, now patrol the land. They are not yet the titans. They will become, but they are ambitious. Their posture is different. Their limbs are held beneath their bodies, not sprawled to the side. They move with purpose, capable of speed and endurance. The world is ready for motion again, and they are built to move. I picture one slender 6 feet long, its body dark and sinuous, its tail balancing each stride. It moves through the dry forest with a quiet grace, the sunlight glinting off its scales. It pauses to drink from a shallow pool, then raises its head, nostrils tasting the air. Every sense is alive. Predators like this are rare, but they shape everything. Nearby herds of small herbivores graze on low cycads and seed ferns. They are cautious, always watching, always ready to flee. Their feet leave delicate imprints in the damp soil, traces that millions of years later will fossilize into the story we now read. I imagine the soundscape wind through conifers, the rustle of leaves, as animals move, the faint chirp of insects that have returned to the skies. The world is not silent anymore. It hums again softly, as if waking from a long dream. As the Triassic ages unfold, the Earth finds new balance. The climate stabilizes, the carbon cycle repairs itself, and oxygen levels rise once more. The rain returns to many places, carving rivers through red stone, feeding lakes and wetlands. The deserts shrink. Green begins to spread across Pangaea's flanks, and with stability comes creativity. Evolution begins to experiment again. Amid the archosaurs, 2 great paths emerge, one toward the crocodile-like lineages that dominate rivers and swamps, and one toward the upright, warm-blooded line that will become the dinosaurs. The earliest dinosaurs are not giants. They are small, agile creatures, bipedal, lightly built, swift. They hunt insects and small reptiles, scavenging carcasses left by larger predators. But what sets them apart is energy. They are always moving, always alert, warm-blooded in a cooling world. I follow one in thought, a creature no longer than a man's height, its skin patterned in shades of gray and rust. It moves with fluid precision, claws clicking softly on the ground. It tilts its head as it listens, the muscles in its neck smooth and strong. When it runs, it does not crawl or waddle. It strides balanced, coordinated, beautiful. That stride will one day shake the earth, but not yet. For now, the Triassic remains a patchwork, an age of beginnings, not dominance. In the lowlands, amphibians cling to the last of their swamps. In the skies, insects multiply again, filling the air with color and motion. Dragonflies and beetles return, small winged reptiles. The first pterosaurs begin to glide above rivers. It is a world of small miracles. At night, the temperature drops sharply. I imagine sitting beside a Triassic lake, the stars above bright and unbroken. The moon, older now, but still guiding the tides, casts silver across the water. Somewhere, an early reptile calls a guttural, throaty sound that echoes against the stone. In that stillness, I can almost feel the planet breathing again. The continents drift slowly northward. The equator remains dry, but rain returns to the edges of Pangaea. Ferns and conifers spread, the soil thickens, and ecosystems mature. In the ocean, too, recovery is underway. Coral reefs rebuild in warm shallows. New species of fish evolve, streamlined, fast silver flashes darting beneath the surface. Mollusks and crustaceans diversify, forming intricate food webs. But the rulers of the sea are new, the ichthyosaurs, marine reptiles shaped like dolphins, their limbs transformed into fins, their spines flexible, their eyes enormous. They glide through the Triassic seas with effortless grace, predators of astonishing speed and precision. They are not fish, yet they have mastered the sea more completely than fish ever did. Evolution, it seems, does not forget. Following them are the nothosaurs and plesiosaurs, long-necked, paddle-limbed hunters that prowl the coastal shallows. Above the waves, pterosaurs skim for prey. Below, ammonites spiral through the depths like living jewels. The Earth is reinventing motion, swimming, flying, running all at once. And yet, the planet remains restless. Volcanism still flares along the rift lines that begin to split Pangaea apart. The Earth is opening wounds that will one day become new oceans, the birth of the Atlantic. I stand in thought at the edge of one such rift, a long scar in the crust, glowing with molten rock. Steam rises, the air trembling with heat. The ground beneath my feet hums. The continents are no longer still. They are stretching, dividing, preparing to drift. The geography of the future is being written here in fire and stone. As the Triassic continues, the world grows more complex, more alive. The ecosystems that began as fragile mosaics now interlock like gears. Herbivores feed on cycads, predators stalk the herds, scavengers follow the kills. Insects pollinate plants. Decomposers return nutrients to the soil. The planet, once broken, now functions as one great organism again. But balance never lasts. Late in the Triassic, the Earth shifts again. Volcanic rifts along what will become the Atlantic trigger vast eruptions, releasing carbon dioxide into the air. The climate warms sharply. Oceans acidify once more. It is not the cataclysm of the Permian, but it is enough. Many species, especially the older reptile lineages, vanish. Amphibians decline. The last of the great synapsids, the mammal-like reptiles, fade into obscurity. Only a few small furred descendants remain, nocturnal, hidden, enduring. And in their absence, the dinosaurs rise. The extinction clears the stage as it always does. And those small, swift, upright archosaurs, who had waited quietly, now expand into every available niche. They grow taller, stronger, faster. They adapt to every climate: deserts, forests, plains. Within a few million years, the world is theirs. I imagine watching them spread, first in small groups, then in herds that thunder across the plains. Their feet shake the dry ground. Dust rises behind them in shimmering clouds. The air vibrates with their movement. The world that began in fire and silence has become one of motion and sound. The age of dinosaurs has begun. The first giants emerge, long-necked sauropodomorphs, grazing on conifers, sharp-toothed theropods hunting in packs. The air is filled with the cries of life reasserting itself. The Earth, once nearly dead, now thrums with abundance. And as the sun sets over that red Triassic horizon, I can almost hear it, the low rhythmic breath of a living planet reborn once again from its own ashes. The air is thicker now, warmer, richer. When I breathe in, I taste life, the green of forests, the salt of the sea, the dampness of a planet that has found its rhythm again. The silence of the Permian and the dryness of the Triassic have passed. The world has healed, and what a world it has become. I see it from above in my mind, continents drifting apart, the scars of Pangaea opening into blue veins of ocean. The great supercontinent has cracked, split by rifts that bleed molten light into the sea. Between the pieces, water floods in, and where once there was desert, there is now coastline. New lands form humid and fertile. The earth is breathing deeply again. The Jurassic has begun. The climate softens, warm, moist, generous. Rain falls often, rivers carve valleys, and forests return vast and green. The skies are full of clouds that glow gold at sunrise and burn red at dusk. I walk through one of these forests in imagination. The air is heavy with the scent of ferns and resin. Trees rise higher than any that came before, their trunks as wide as houses, their crowns lost in mist. Conifers and cycads dominate, but there are also ginkgos with their delicate fans, and the first true seed ferns, their leaves glistening with dew. Everywhere there is sound, the call of insects, the rustle of leaves, the distant rumble of something enormous moving through the trees. The ground beneath me is soft, covered in a thick carpet of fallen needles. Tiny lizards dart between roots. Insects hum around the trunks, feeding on sap and pollen. The world feels complete, a living cathedral of green. And within it, the dinosaurs now rule. They are not the small, cautious creatures of the Triassic anymore. They are vast, confident, elegant, diverse. They walk, run, swim, and fly. They are the architects of the Jurassic biosphere, shaping every ecosystem with their presence. I step into a clearing and feel the ground tremble. Ahead of me, a herd of sauropods moves through the trees, necks long as rivers, bodies massive and slow. Their feet sink into the soil with each step, leaving craters that will harden into fossils. The air vibrates with the deep rhythmic thud of their movement. They are not beasts of violence, but of grace, herbivores that feed on the highest leaves, stripping branches effortlessly with their teeth. Each swing of their necks stirs the air like wind through water. Their eyes are calm, ancient, patient. I can almost feel their breath, warm and steady, smelling of fern and pine. Behind them, smaller dinosaurs follow, fast bipedal ornithopods, their tails balancing their every stride. They move in herds too, feeding on the low plants that thrive in the sauropod's wake. Their calls echo softly through the forest, a chorus of communication, warning, and comfort. The earth has never known such harmony of movement. Predators stalk them, of course. The theropods, agile hunters with curved claws and intelligent eyes, move through the shadows, silent but sure. They are the perfect balance of power and precision, their bodies sculpted for motion. I see one now, a mid-sized predator, its skin dappled in light and shadow, its gaze locked on a herd. It waits, breath slow, muscles tense. Then, in an instant, it explodes forward, a blur of motion, claws slicing the air. The herd scatters, their feet pounding the ground. Dust and fern, spores rise. The predator catches only one, the weak, the slow. Life and death, still in rhythm, still in balance. The forest returns to quiet. Above, the air is alive too. The pterosaurs rule the sky, their wings vast and leathery, their cries sharp and piercing. They glide along thermal currents, diving over rivers, plucking fish from the water. Some are small, delicate, almost bird-like. Others, like Pteranodon, are giants, their wings stretching over 7 meters. Their flight is effortless, ancient. They are the poets of the wind. And beneath them in the oceans, another empire has risen. The ichthyosaurs still glide through the deep, sleek as arrows. They give birth to live young like mammals, and their eyes, enormous and silver, see through darkness with ease. Alongside them swim the plesiosaurs, their necks long and elegant, their flippers moving like wings beneath the waves. They rise to the surface to breathe, their heads breaking the water with quiet grace. The sea, once barren, has become a world of wonder again. At the bottom of the ocean, coral reefs bloom bright, alive, intricate. Schools of fish weave through them like living fabric. The water shimmers with color and motion. The world, after so much death, has become art again. I think often about the intelligence of ecosystems, not the mind of any single creature, but the consciousness of balance itself. The Jurassic Earth feels alive in every sense. Its forests regulate its air, its oceans feed its sky. The carbon and water cycles dance together unbroken, seamless. Even the volcanoes seem gentler now, exhaling steam rather than fury, feeding minerals into the soil that the forests drink greedily. The planet hums with peace, but peace does not mean stillness. The continents continue to drift, the ocean currents continue to shift, and with every change, evolution follows. I walk one evening through an open valley where the forest gives way to grass-like ferns and cycads. The sun sets behind distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet. In the fading light, a group of small feathered dinosaurs gather near a riverbank. Feathers, yes. They are not yet the flight feathers of birds, but soft hair-like filaments used for warmth display, and perhaps the beginnings of flight. Evolution has been quietly experimenting again. One of them, small, delicate, curious, hops onto a rock and stretches its arms. The feathers along its forelimbs catch the breeze. It glides for a moment, not far, but enough to matter. Enough to prove a point to the universe: flight can be born from falling. The others watch. In time, they too will learn. And in that one moment of gliding, the history of birds begins. I stand there silent as twilight deepens and stars appear. The air cools, the insects quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a sauropod calls a low echoing sound that rolls through the valley like thunder. The earth feels ancient and eternal, but also young and curious. Insects drift through the air, glowing faintly in the dim light. Early fireflies, small lanterns marking the night. The first frogs croak along the river's edge. The wind carries the scent of wet earth and fern. The night of the Jurassic is warm, peaceful, infinite. I lie down in thought beneath a ginkgo tree and look at the stars. The same stars that shone over the molten earth of the Hadean, the same stars that will watch over the ice ages yet to come. And I wonder what the planet feels. It must know in its own way that it has survived something impossible, that it has rebuilt itself not once but many times, that its surface has been molten, frozen, drowned, burned, and yet here it is, breathing, blooming, alive. The earth carries its scars with grace, and perhaps that is the deepest truth of this story, not the rise and fall of species, but the endurance of beauty. The way life, no matter how many times it breaks, always finds a way to return in a different form. The Jurassic world is proof of that resilience. Every fern, every bird, every ripple of the sea is a testament to recovery. And though the world ahead holds more change, more fire, more loss, for now it rests vast, green, radiant. The air hums, the forests whisper, the oceans shimmer. The sky holds wings again. For the first time in eons, the earth feels content. The air feels warmer again, softer, more perfumed than before. The earth has entered a kind of golden age. The forests have thickened, the oceans have deepened, and the skies are alive with motion. The continents, once joined in one vast mass, now drift apart like great islands adrift on an invisible sea. Each carries its own rhythm, its own climate, its own life. I stand in my imagination at the edge of one such land, where the ocean breathes against a shore of white sand and fern-covered cliffs. The air smells of salt and flowers. Above the sky is a pale, endless blue, and the warmth of the sun feels ancient and new all at once. For the first time, flowers have appeared. They are small at first, fragile, delicate stars of color among the green. But their arrival changes everything. Until now, plants have relied on wind and water to spread their pollen, their seeds carried by chance. But the flowers bring something new: attraction, color, scent, beauty as a function of survival. Insects drawn to the fragrance brush against pollen and carry it from bloom to bloom. A partnership is born, a quiet revolution between plant and animal. The world becomes painted in new hues: reds, yellows, purples. The green monotony of the earlier forests gives way to a living mosaic of blossoms. Each color, each petal, each curve of a stem is a signal, a whisper from one species to another: come closer, help me live. And so they do. Bees, wasps, butterflies, each evolves alongside the flowers, refining their shapes, their senses, their hunger. The air hums with their labor. Every meadow becomes an orchestra of color and motion. I walk through one of these fields, in thought, my hands brushing against petals, my feet sinking into soft soil. The sunlight is golden, the breeze gentle, the sound of wings constant. This world feels almost peaceful, too perfect, too alive. But even in perfection, there is restlessness. Beyond the flowers in the distance, the ground trembles beneath the weight of the great ones, the titanosaurs, the last and largest of the long-necked giants. Their massive bodies move slowly across the plain, their necks sweeping the air like ships through fog. Their shadows fall over trees and rivers. They are creatures of scale and silence. Each breath they take stirs dust into sunlight. Each step reshapes the ground. Near them move herds of hadrosaurs, the duck-billed grazers, their crests and calls echoing through the valley. They move together, their skin dappled with patterns, their young walking safely between them. Communication has evolved here, not in words, but in tones, gestures, the rhythm of movement. The world is not just alive, it is social. And in the forests at the edge of the plains, hunters wait. The tyrannosaurs, apex predators of their time, move with terrifying grace. Their eyes are keen, their senses sharp, their muscles precise. But they are not mindless beasts. They are thinkers of instinct. They hunt with strategy, not chaos. I watch one in the shadow of a tree, its breath slow, its gaze fixed on the herd. There is calculation in that stillness, a focus born of survival and intelligence. It waits patient, letting the wind carry scent and sound. When it moves, it does so like a storm breaking. The ground shakes, the air tears, the world holds its breath. But even this violence feels like part of the order, not destruction, but balance. The prey runs, the predator feeds, the cycle closes. No malice, no cruelty, just the mathematics of existence. Far away, mountains rise young, sharp, volcanic. The earth's crust is restless again. New oceans open, old seaways flood the continents. The Atlantic expands slowly, its dark depths swallowing the edges of what once was one world. The climate warms further. Polar ice retreats entirely. Seas creep inland, turning lowlands into shallow, sunlit bays. Marine life thrives. Ammonites coil through the water, glowing shells catching light. Mosasaurs, vast and powerful, glide beneath the surface. Coral reefs expand bright as galaxies beneath the sea. The oceans are warm and full, the land lush and green. It feels as though the planet has reached its most beautiful state, the height of its living dream. And yet, beneath it all, there is a quiet pulse of unease. I feel it not in the air or the soil, but in the time itself, a slow vibration of inevitability. The earth, for all its life, is never still. Even peace carries the memory of change. I sit at the edge of a shallow lake one evening, watching the sky darken. The surface mirrors the clouds, the trees, the distant mountains. Dragonflies skim across the water, their wings catching the last light. Somewhere a low rumble thunder, or perhaps something deeper. I close my eyes. I can feel the heartbeat of the world beneath me. It is steady but heavy, as though the planet itself is thinking. It remembers the fire. It remembers the ice. It knows that balance never lasts forever. Still, it does not hurry. For millions of years, the Cretaceous remains a world of warmth and abundance. Forests stretch across continents, rivers carve new paths, the wind carries pollen across vast distances. Birds, true birds, now with hollow bones and feathers of every hue, fill the skies with their cries. They are descendants of dinosaurs, yet lighter, freer. Evolution's artistry at work again. I follow one with my eyes, small, elegant, gliding over a field of flowers. It lands softly on a branch, tilts its head, and sings. That sound, the first song, is more than survival. It is expression, beauty, without reason. The earth listens. Time moves slowly here. The days are long, the nights warm. Stars glitter above jungles and seas. Each sunrise feels eternal. Each sunset a promise. It is easy to forget that the universe outside still shifts, still spins, still waits. Then one night, a streak of light crosses the sky. Bright, sudden, silent. It burns a path through the stars and fades beyond the horizon. No creature notices. The forest remains still, but something has changed. Far away, beyond the reach of any eye or sense, a body of stone and ice travels through space, its orbit drawn toward a small blue world. It is older than the Earth itself, a relic of the solar system's birth, and its path is true. It carries no malice, no purpose, only momentum. The planet does not know. The oceans breathe, the forests whisper, the dinosaurs move through their endless days. Life continues unaware that it lives in the last golden light of an age. The next dawn comes like any other, soft, warm, full of birdsong. The air smells of rain. The flowers open to the sun. And the earth in its innocence turns slowly toward the future. It begins with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the silence that comes before a storm. The moment when the air feels too still, too full, as though the world itself is holding its breath. The morning is bright. The sun rises over the forests and plains as it has for millions of years. Sauropods graze along the rivers. Pterosaurs wheel high above the cliffs. The sky is painted in gold and blue, the air alive with the scent of flowers and the hum of insects. It is by all appearances a perfect day, and yet, something in the air feels different. The light seems sharper, the shadows longer. The birds, the descendants of small feathered dinosaurs, fly lower than usual, restless. Even the great beasts pause at the water's edge, their eyes lifting toward the horizon as though sensing a tremor too deep for sound. Far away beyond the curve of the sky, the messenger is coming. A fragment of another world, ancient and cold, moving faster than anything Earth has ever known. It does not aim. It does not decide. It simply obeys gravity, the invisible thread that binds every planet, every star. In the time it takes to blink, it crosses the void. The final day of the Cretaceous has begun. I imagine standing on a coastal cliff in what will one day be called the Yucatan Peninsula. The sea stretches endlessly before me, calm and blue. The wind carries the faint cries of seabirds. Then, for the briefest instant, the sunlight dims. The air shivers. A second sun appears in the sky, small, white, and growing. There is no time to think, no time to move. The light becomes unbearable, burning through cloud and air alike. The ocean flashes white. The world ends in silence. Then comes the sound. A sound so vast it cannot be described. It does not echo, it consumes. The impact vaporizes stone, ocean, and atmosphere. A mountain of fire erupts skyward, brighter than anything since the planet's birth. The ground heaves. The sea rises in walls. The sky ignites. Everything becomes light and then shadow. For thousands of miles, forests catch fire. Shockwaves circle the globe faster than sound. Mountains crumble. The air turns to flame. And yet, amid this unimaginable violence, there is still a strange, haunting beauty, the light of the impact reflected in 1,000 waves, the molten horizon glowing like a sunrise that never ends. Then darkness. Ash fills the sky. It rises, spreads, and wraps the planet in a shroud of night. Days vanish. The temperature falls. The rain that follows is not water, but acid burning everything it touches. The fires die, and with them the forests, leaving behind only silence. For months, perhaps years, the sun is hidden. Plants wither. The chain of life, stretched to its limit, begins to break. The great creatures of the Cretaceous, the dinosaurs that once ruled the land, fall one by one. Their bodies become fossils, their bones buried beneath the layers of ash and time. The earth, once green and warm, grows cold and gray. It feels like the end of everything, and yet it is not. I stand in the quiet aftermath in imagination. The world is unrecognizable. Blackened forests, frozen rivers, skies heavy with dust. But in the stillness beneath the ruin, life endures. Tiny creatures burrow through the ash. Seeds lie dormant in the soil, waiting. The smallest things, those that once lived in the shadows of giants, begin to stir. Mammals, small and shivering, emerge from their hiding places. They feed on what little remains: roots. Insects, anything they can find. Their eyes are wide, their senses keen. For the first time, the world belongs to them. I picture one, a creature no larger than a rat, darting through the debris of a fallen forest. The air is cold, the ground slick with ash, but it moves quickly, urgently, as though it understands that survival now is not strength, but adaptability. It finds warmth in burrows, food in decay, safety in darkness. And somehow, through the long winter of extinction, it endures. Above ground, the winds rage for years. Oceans cool. Volcanoes awaken. The earth remakes itself once more, slowly, painfully. The dust begins to settle. The light begins to return. The first sunrise after the long night is dim, filtered through haze, but it is enough. The world glows faintly gray, turning to gold. The air smells of minerals and damp soil. The planet breathes again. The forests will return, but differently this time. The species that dominated before are gone. In their place, new plants will rise, angiosperms, flowering species better suited to a changing climate. Grasses will spread, covering the earth in soft, endless green. And the survivors, small mammals, birds, insects, will inherit a world renewed. The age of dinosaurs ends not with finality, but with transformation. The earth stripped bare has created space for something new. I think of the irony how the greatest extinction since the Permian becomes the seedbed of our own existence. The mammal that hides in ash will one day give rise to apes and eventually to humans. The silence after the fire becomes the cradle of thought, memory, and wonder. From the death of giants, the spark of consciousness will grow. When I look back across time, it feels like an endless pattern creation. Destruction, renewal, all parts of one vast breathing cycle. The earth never truly dies, it only transforms. The meteor was not a punishment, not even an ending, but a turning of the page. The stars look down on the silent world, the same stars that watched the molten seas of the Hadean, the icy deserts of the Precambrian, the forests of the Carboniferous, the roaring seas of the Jurassic. They have seen everything, and still they shine. I stand beneath them in my mind, amid the ashes of the old world, and I whisper into the wind, "You've done this before. You will do it again." Because the earth remembers. Every scar, every storm, every extinction. It keeps them all, not as wounds, but as lessons. From fire to ocean, from darkness to light, it learns to adapt, to balance, to begin again. And somewhere in the ashes, life begins to move. Slowly at first, a seed splitting open, a sprout reaching toward the pale sun, a creature crawling from its burrow. The silence breaks. The first new songbird sings. The age of rebirth has begun. The fires have faded. The skies have cleared. The earth wakes trembling softly beneath the first light of a gentler sun. The world that rises from the ashes of the Cretaceous is not the same. It is smaller, quieter, tender in its fragility. The forests that once stretched endlessly across continents are gone, replaced by open plains and the faint shimmer of new grass. The great reptiles are no more their bones resting beneath layers of stone, their shapes preserved only in the Earth's slow memory. The planet is still. And in that stillness, life begins again. The air is cool, rich in oxygen once more. The soil is dark and fertile, nourished by the remains of a vanished age. Rain falls softly, washing away the soot and salt of the old world. The oceans calm. The wind carries new scents, moss, earth, the faint sweetness of growth. From the shadows, small creatures emerge. They are mammals, survivors of the long night. Their ancestors hid in burrows, fed on roots and insects, and waited while the world burned above them. Now they rise cautiously, blinking in the new light. At first, they are timid, shrew-like, rodent-like, clinging to survival as their ancestors did. But the world is open now, empty of giants, full of space. The forests no longer tremble beneath the weight of thunder-limbed dinosaurs. The air no longer belongs to leathery winged hunters. The earth has given them opportunity, and they take it. In the warmth of the Paleocene, the first great mammalian expansion begins. Shapes shift and multiply. Some stay small, clinging to the underbrush, scurrying in fear of the still-present reptiles and birds of prey. Others grow bolder, larger, stronger, more curious. In time, the forests return thick and green, but never again as ancient or humid as those of the Mesozoic. The trees are different now, oaks, magnolias, palms, the children of the flowering plants that survived the fall. Their blossoms open to the new sun, and the air fills again with the hum of bees and the songs of small feathered descendants of the dinosaurs. I walk among them in imagination, and the world feels familiar in a way it never has before. The colors are softer, the air gentler. Life no longer feels ruled by titans, but by possibility. In the treetops, primates begin their slow experiments with motion and sight. Their fingers curl around branches with surprising dexterity. Their eyes forward-facing, judge distance and depth. They are still small, no larger than cats, but they carry within them something quiet and extraordinary curiosity. They pause to look at the sky, to wonder in their own simple way. Elsewhere, the oceans teem with new life. Whales, once small land mammals, begin to return to the sea, their limbs reshaping into flippers, their bodies streamlining into perfect forms for the deep. Evolution has begun to write poetry again. On the continents, new giants rise. Elephants, rhinoceroses, titanotheres, their bodies shaped by abundance. The ground trembles again, but not with the thunder of reptilian feet. This is the steady tread of warm-blooded life. The earth is warm, perhaps too warm. Tropical forests reach the poles. Seas are high, wrapping the continents in a humid embrace. The planet breathes in long, slow rhythms, content for a while. But peace, as always, carries change. Deep beneath the crust, the continents continue to move. Mountains rise where oceans once lay. India collides with Asia, pushing the Himalayas skyward, white teeth biting into the sky. The atmosphere shifts. Winds change course. The warmth begins to fade. By the Eocene, the air cools, the oceans stir. Ice returns, faint at first, then more certain. The poles, long forgotten, begin to freeze again. Forests shrink. Grass spreads. It seems such a small thing, the rise of grass, and yet it transforms the world. Grasses create open plains, endless fields of green. Animals evolve to match them, herds of grazers, swift and strong, moving in unison. Horses appear delicate and fast. Antelope-like creatures bound across the savannas. Predators adapt, growing leaner, faster, sharper. The age of the open world has begun. I see them in my mind, herds moving, beneath a golden sun, the air alive with dust and motion. Lions and wolves, not yet in the forms I know, hunt across these plains, their eyes bright with the logic of survival. And in the trees, the primates watch. Their hands grow more skilled, their minds more intricate. Some descend from the branches, curious about the ground. They begin to walk differently, using 2 legs, at times their hands free to touch, to carry, to create. They do not yet understand what they are becoming. But evolution is patient, tireless, meticulous. I picture one of them, a small creature, half ape, half something new, standing at the edge of a clearing, looking out over a plain, glowing with the light of morning. It hesitates, then steps forward upright. The moment is quiet, almost invisible in the vastness of time, but everything changes. The world feels it. It has taken 4 billion years to reach this point, from molten stone to breathing life, from single cells to thinking eyes. The planet has written itself through fire, ice, and extinction to arrive here, the threshold of awareness. I feel a strange sadness thinking about it, as though the Earth itself knows it is about to be seen, truly seen for the first time. Because to be seen is to be changed. And in the slow unfolding of millennia, these walking, thinking mammals, our ancestors, begin to shape the land, not just by living, but by imagining. They build tools, then fire, then memory. They learn to tell stories, to fear the dark, to look at the stars and ask why. The Earth has created a being that can remember it. In that memory lies both beauty and danger. The planet breathes deeply, almost warily. The ice sheets expand again. The world enters a rhythm of cold and warmth, the ice ages. Glaciers carve mountains, oceans fall and rise, forests retreat and return. Mammoths roam the frozen tundra, their tusks curling toward the sky. Saber-toothed cats stalk the edge of the world. Early humans wrapped in furs build fires against the wind. The air is harsh, the nights long, but the spark of consciousness has caught. I imagine one of them, a human, or almost human, sitting by a fire as snow drifts outside. Their eyes reflect the flames, but also something deeper, awareness. They are the first to look at the Earth not as a place, but as a being alive, mysterious and full of memory. Outside, the stars shimmer coldly. The glaciers gleam under moonlight. And beneath their feet, the planet dreams of the first oceans, the first forests, the first breaths of life. Every atom in their body, every spark of thought is made of what the Earth once was. The silence of the ancient seas, the fire of the mantle, the ash of fallen stars. They do not know this, not yet. But they feel it, a connection so deep, it will one day become myth, faith, science, and poetry. The Earth, for the first time, listens to one of its own creations speak, and somewhere across the wind it whispers back. The ice has retreated. The Earth breathes again. Where once there were glaciers, now there are rivers. Where tundra stretched for miles, now grass sways in the wind. The age of endless winter is fading, and the air is warmer, not too warm yet, not dangerous, only tender, as if the planet itself sighs with relief. The world looks familiar now. Forests rise again along the hillsides. Valleys fill with water, becoming lakes that mirror the sky. Birds return in flocks, their calls weaving through the morning mist. The mammals, the survivors of the cold, spread across continents, shaping the balance of every ecosystem they touch. And among them, humanity begins to bloom. At first, they are wanderers, fragile bodies wrapped in furs, faces weathered by wind and sun. They follow the herds, trace the rivers, climb the ridges where fire and stars meet the horizon. They move not to conquer, but to belong. They carry with them what no other creature does, memory. Every step is a story. Every mark in the dirt a trace of thought. They remember the paths of the animals, the smell of rain, the voice of the sea. And in the evenings, when the world turns gold and the air cools, they gather by the fire and speak. At first their words are simple gestures, sounds half-formed names. But slowly, the sounds shape meaning, and meaning becomes language. With language, the earth learns to speak through them. They tell stories of how the mountains were made, how the stars were born, how fire came to their hands. They imagine the sky as a great river, the ocean as a mother, the thunder as a god. They do not know that in their myths, they are remembering fragments of the planet's own past passed down in dreams. I picture one of them sitting near the fire. Their face glows in the flicker of the flames. Behind them, night stretches wide and deep, filled with the sounds of crickets and the crackle of burning wood. They look up at the stars, the same stars that watched over the molten seas of the Hadean, the forests of the Carboniferous, the storms of the Ice Age, and they wonder. That wonder is the beginning of everything. It leads to painting, to stone, to song. It leads to tools, to trade, to discovery, and eventually to memory carved into symbols, words, and history. Humanity learns to build not only with their hands, but with their thoughts. They create villages, then cities. They raise walls, carve temples, measure the seasons, map the sky. The earth becomes not just a home, but a mirror of their imagination. Every civilization that rises, Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus, the Maya, builds upon the same ground, the same rivers, the same soil that remembers the touch of ancient seas. The stones they use were once mountains formed by the breath of volcanoes. The water they drink once ran across the bones of the first forests. And the air they breathe, it is the same air that carried the cries of dinosaurs, the songs of primordial insects, the exhalations of the planet itself. In every breath, the earth lives through them. As time passes, they begin to see the patterns of change. They learn that the sun does not always rise, the same way that rivers shift, that storms return, that all things, even empires, fade. Some listen to the earth's lessons. Others forget. They build great machines, harness fire and metal, dig deep into the crust for fuel and minerals. The lights of their cities outshine the stars. The noise of their creation drowns the whispers of the wind. The balance trembles. And yet, through it all, the planet endures. It has seen more than they can imagine, more than any one species could. It has watched continents move, oceans vanish, mountains rise and fall like waves. Humanity's time, though brilliant, is only a breath in that endless rhythm. But it is a precious breath, because for the first time, the earth is being seen not only as a place, but as a story. Humanity has become its witness, the voice through which the planet remembers itself. When we speak of ancient oceans, we speak with the memory of salt still in our blood. When we study volcanoes, we trace the heat that once forged the rocks beneath our feet. When we look at the night sky, we are seeing the same stars that once lit the newborn earth. We are not separate from this world. We are its continuation. I imagine the earth watching quietly as humanity gazes up at the moon, the companion that once was, part of its own body, born of collision and chaos, now a guardian of its tides and time. The two worlds, bound by gravity and memory, drift together through the dark as they have for billions of years. The moonlight glimmers on oceans that have never stopped moving, waves that have carried the reflections of every age, from fire to ice, from stillness to life. And somewhere under that same moon, someone lies awake listening. They hear the sound of the wind through trees, the hush of distant waves, the faint hum of the earth's heart beneath their bed. They do not realize it, but they are hearing the echo of 4.5 billion years, the breath of the planet that made them, the rhythm of existence itself. It is not a loud sound. It is a slow one, a pulse, a heartbeat, a lullaby. I breathe with it now. The story of Earth is not one of chaos or destruction, but of endurance, of constant becoming. Fire became stone. Stone became soil. Soil became life. And life became memory. Through every extinction and rebirth, the same pattern continued to fall, to change, to rise again. And here we are at the quiet edge of that story, still listening, still learning. The earth turns gently beneath us, carrying mountains, oceans, and dreams alike. The stars drift slowly across the sky. The night deepens, and in that stillness, the planet whispers once more, not in words, but in warmth, in gravity, in the quiet rhythm of its turning. It says, "Rest now. You are home." The waves hush against the shore. The trees murmur softly in the wind. The air grows cool and calm. Somewhere in that deep, timeless space between waking and sleep, the story continues not as noise, but as peace. So close your eyes. Let the planet breathe for you. Let the heartbeat of the world carry you through the dark. The earth remembers, and tonight it dreams. Good night.